ואמא בהנה יפה וצעירה, אז אבא על גבעה בנה לבית. חלפו העדידים חצי מעברה, וטלטלים הפכו שיפה בינתיים. אבל על חוף ירדן כמו מאומה לא קרה, אותה הדומיה וגם אותה התפאורה. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. בשביל הנה יורדת ענת התינוקות, הם בירדן ישכשכו רגליים. גדלו הילדים וכבר למדו לשחות, ובני הנעורים חוקרים בשניים. אבל על חוף ירדן כמו מאומה לא קרה, אותה הדומיה וגם אותה התפאורה. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. מעבר לירדן רמו התותחים, והשלום חזר בסוף הקיץ. וכל התינוקות היו לאנשים, ושוב על הגבעה הקימו בית. אבל על חוף ירדן כמו מאומה לא קרה, אותה הדומיה וגם אותה התפאורה. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים. חורשת האקליפטוס, הגשר הסירה, וריח המלוח על המים.
ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על ביתנו התינוקת שמורי לי הטוב, על האש המבוערת, על המים הזכים, על האיש השב הביתה מן המרחקים. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור לי, לי הטוב, על הדבש ועל העוקץ, על המר והמתוק, על נטע קור נטוע, אל תשכח את התקווה. השיבני יגון מפחד פתע וממלחמה. שמור על המעט שיש לי, על האור ועל הכף, על הפרי שלא הבשילה דבש ונפח. על כל אלה, על כל אלה, שמור נלי.
Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Is this working? I hope so. I always hope so. All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody, and welcome to this week's Torah study with the World Alliance of Qara'im. I am, of course, your humble host, Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im and Karaite Insights. And I guess I'll give a little bit of a monologue, you know, what I think is going on in Israel right now. So I think, sadly, Israel is failing at the war, failing horribly at the war. And, well, before I forget, I'll start with another prediction of mine. I think that eventually, I don't know if it's this time around, but eventually where all this is heading is it's going to mean the end of the current state of Israel as we know it. There's no doubt about that in my mind, one way or another. I'm going to make another prediction, which is I think that the end of Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'm not encouraging this, but I'm just predicting, I think the end of Benjamin Netanyahu is going to be that of, he's going to have basically the same end as Muammar Gaddafi, who, by the way, was apparently Jewish, I think, on his mother's side. You can look that up on the internet, but there's some evidence to that. And Nicolae Ceausescu. I think this is going to be his end. I think it's not going to be that he just, you know, is deposed as prime minister and, you know, and put on trial for corruption. I think that where this is all heading is that this is going to cause the eventual complete collapse of the state of Israel, just like Libya. Let's take Libya, right? Or even Czechoslovakia after the fall of the Romania after the fall of the Soviet Union. Ceausescu sounds like Czechoslovakia, so I got too confused. Romania after the fall of the Soviet Union, there was a complete collapse in the, you know, in those countries, and that basically allowed, hold on one second, please. And that basically allowed you know, rebels or just the street to take over and punish their former leaders as they saw fit. So, Shabbat Shalom desde Cuba. Bienvenidos, Hector Henry Valdez Cruz. So I think we have we're going to have a similar situation here because the two elements that would result in such a thing, the complete breakdown of structure, the complete breakdown of society, I'm sure that's coming to Israel one way or another. And I'll tell you why I think so in a second. I don't know if it's going to come this time around, but definitely in the near future. And once you have that breakdown in society, combined with the fact that people literally, they cannot stand to look at the face of Benjamin Netanyahu anymore. Every time they look at his face now, all they see is 1,400 or 1,200 dead Israelis, plus all the mistakes that have been made, you know, through the Oslo Accords, which, despite his claims, he basically encouraged and promoted in various ways. I don't even remember anymore. There were so many different agreements, meetings, this, that. Who even knows, you know? But Y agreement, I think, was his, and a bunch of others. So people cannot even stand to look this person in the face anymore. It's not just that they don't want him in office. They have a revulsion towards this person. They see him as a liar, as someone who's lied and deceived them for decades now. Remember, a person is judged by what happens in his end, not what happens in his beginning. because it's unclear where events are going to lead. Things may seem great for a while. Listen, let's look back during the Trump administration. I'm a huge fan of Donald Trump. I've always said that, and I don't hide it for a second. But during the Trump administration, everything for Benjamin Netanyahu was coming up roses, right? He was being protected by the United States. There was a president in the White House who was an actual true lover of Israel, who has a Jewish daughter, Jewish grandchildren, and actually loves Israel. That's of course Donald Trump I'm talking about. And he was, and they were starting to put forth the Abraham Accords. So Benjamin Netanyahu was riding high. It looked like he was going to be, king of the greatest period of peace and prosperity in Israel since the time of King Solomon. And then all of that changed. It didn't change instantaneously. Biden stole the election in 2020 and became president, and all of a sudden Biden is not so pro-Israel. Maybe he himself is, but he has no say in anything. His, handlers who decide policy and put out his speeches and propaganda and prop him up in front of the teleprompter, they are very anti-Israel. Camel Face Harris and Benedict Blinken and all of these people, they're very anti-Israel. And so, suddenly there wasn't such a friend to Israel in the White House. It was back to, Obama administration part 2. And then, of course, October. And by the way, Netanyahu stabbed Trump in the back because Trump was very upset with Netanyahu that he didn't support Trump's attempt to put out the word that the 2020 election, well, I don't want to get banned on Facebook or YouTube, but let's say it was problematic. Let's put it that way. And basically Netanyahu just went on, congratulated Biden. And Trump doesn't forget. When someone stabs him in the back, he does not forget. So I don't think when Trump rises to power again, if he does in 2024, that he's going to be quite so friendly to Israel, if Netanyahu is still even in power at the time. Anywho, so we already saw that, Netanyahu was kind of knocked off his perch a little bit. But okay, the Abraham Accords were going ahead. Peace was being spoken about with Saudi Arabia. But it wasn't, there was something a little bit different because the support of the United States wasn't as strong as it was during the Trump administration. And then October 7th happened. And sometimes it takes an event in one's life, in a country's history, to really make things clear about where things were heading. It's not always clear where things are heading until something happens. And then that serves as a clarifying event. And that's exactly, why does it keep on saying verifying WhatsApp? Okay, thank you for verifying WhatsApp. And that's exactly what happened on October 7th. Suddenly became clear that this Netanyahu dude, who had for decades promoted this idea of peace and prosperity and strength, and he was the protector, he was the daddy of the nation. Suddenly, the daddy on daddy's watch, suddenly the robbers snuck into the house, ransacked the house, and killed the inhabitants. So people literally can't even stand the look of his face. And I literally mean it. I think I know myself, when I see the person on television, I literally get sick. I just don't even want to see his ugly face anymore. I don't want to see him. I don't want to hear him. I want nothing to do with him. And I've heard similar views expressed by many other Jews and Israelis, people living in Israel. So that's what I think. I think this is going to eventually end up at some point with a complete collapse of the current state of Israel, which is not sustainable anyway. And then at that point, the street will take over, or whatever rebel group will take over, or whatever new, structure will rise to power. Hopefully not a Pharisaic Talmudic structure, which I don't think they would anyway. That's what what was going on in Israel beforehand. That's really what it was all about. It was basically the whole judicial reform was a pro-Talmudic. If you really analyze it, it was a pro-Talmudic movement against an anti-Talmudic movement. And quite frankly, I support the anti-Talmudic movement, even though I can't stand the leftists and their America worship and their West worship either. But at the end of the day, it's better than what the right wing wanted to do. The Ben Gvir and Smotrich types, who I agree with them politically, but ultimately what they want to do is usher in a new Pharisaic / Talmudic state, and that we could see from the schism that was created in Israel during the time of the judicial reform problems. We could see that there is no way that Israelis are going to allow such a thing to happen. They'll cause civil war before they'll allow such a thing to happen. At any rate, so the current state of Israel will eventually fail in the current situation, I believe. And then when whatever group takes over, they're not going to be so kind to Netanyahu and all of the other leaders that have been promoting, worship of the West for decades now. And, it didn't only start with the Oslo Accords, but we could say that have been promoting the Oslo Accords, that have been promoting so-called peace with the Palestinians, the quote-unquote Palestinians. There is no such thing, obviously. And even have been promoting peace with Jordan, Egypt. Israelis are sometimes so stupid that they'll say things like, oh, look, the peace with Egypt is held for, what is it now, 1980, 2023. So 40 years, 50 years, something like that. I guess it's just about 45 years or something like that. That doesn't mean it's going to hold for another against Israel. And they have, after Israel, they have the most advanced armed forces and the most advanced weaponry in the entire Middle East, and they have no enemies. Who's their enemy? Libya? It's, Tunisia? I mean, are you kidding me? Algeria, Morocco? Who? They have no enemies. Their only enemy is Israel, okay? And if the Muslim Brotherhood were to take over, so now this dude, Sisi is in control, but he is anti-Muslim Brotherhood, but it's very possible the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Hamas is an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, could take over in Egypt. Then that peace treaty that held for 45 years goes right out the window, when the time is right. And now we have Egypt attacking Israel. And believe me, at that point, Jordan will join in, Iraq will join in, everybody will join in. It's just going to be a free-for-all. And that will mean the end of the state of Israel as we know it. I don't know what will rise afterwards. Hopefully a true Tanach-only / Karaite state will rise afterwards. I can only hope so. But it will mean the end of the current state of Israel. I don't think there's any way getting out of it. If we look at Benjamin Netanyahu, okay, so he is ultimately, when you break it down, despite all of his right-wing rhetoric, despite his putting the kippah on his head when he's, when he wants to look Jewish enough and taking it off when he doesn't want to look Jewish enough, despite all his, tough talk of being a protector, a strong protector of Israel. When you look at his ultimate point of view, his ultimate view on the world, you see that he's a worshiper of America and a worshiper of the West. Okay, let's take Israel's, and what do I mean by that? Let's take Israel's biggest problem. What's Israel's biggest problem? Israel's biggest problem is, one could say, Iran. Okay, Benjamin Netanyahu never called out to Yahweh. Okay, he never said, let's proclaim a 3-day fast in Israel and call out to our God Yahweh and return to the true Torah like Josiah, the king of Judah, did, and bring the people back to the true covenant, call out to our God, to our Elohim Yahweh, and have him come send help for us. No, he did have a God that he called out to. He did have a savior, his own daddy that he called out to. And that savior, that God, that daddy was the United States of America. His entire policy was basically designed to basically goad the United States of America into war against Iran so that the United States would take care of Israel's problem with Iran. Honestly, the United States doesn't really have that much of a problem with Iran because the United States is thousands of miles away from Iran. There's really not that much that Iran could do, quite frankly, to the United States of America, at least in the homeland. Maybe they could do it to the troops in Afghanistan and in Iraq, but they can't do much to the homeland of the United States of America. So basically, Netanyahu was trying to play the United States against America by basically trying to convince the United States of America that Iran that one of the greatest threats to the United States of America was Iran. Yes, Iran clearly hates the United States of America. Israel's the little Satan, and the United States is the big Satan, according to Iran. But there's not much they can do. They don't have a military that can affect the United States of America on its homeland. But Benjamin Netanyahu's attempt was to go the United States of America into war against Iran as a way, basically, of bailing Israel out from its troubles with Iran. And they used the Israel lobby, the Jewish lobby, the Zionist Christian lobby, etc. Anything they could. This is what Benjamin Netanyahu tried to activate over decades to come try to save Israel. So he did call out to his God. Who is his God? It's clear. His God is the West, is the United States of America. He dresses like a Westerner. He talks like a Westerner. He acts like a Westerner. Once in a while, he'll act a little bit Middle Eastern when he needs to. But basically, this is what he does. And in his arrogance, he thinks and thought, and probably still thinks, maybe, that this was going to be his way of saving Israel. He thought he was so slick, he could just talk like an American, act like an American. He could basically, what would be the word, cajole the West or trick the West, or what's the exact word I'm looking for? I don't know. You get the idea. Trick the West or cajole the West into saving Israel's butt. So it's clear who Benjamin Netanyahu's God is. Benjamin Netanyahu's God is the same God as the God of Tel Aviv. The God of Tel Aviv is the United States of America / the West. And we see now the failure of calling out to this false God. And I'll go a little bit deeper into this, but of course I always like to bring up, I can find it here, Isaiah 36:6, if I remember. Let's just bring it up for 1 second. Isaiah, just use the English. Isaiah 36:6. 36. 6. Is that it? I believe. Yes. 5:6. So this is when Sancheriv comes to attack Jerusalem, and King Hezekiah, one of the better kings, one of the good kings of Judah, basically prepares for the defense. He builds an extra wall, which you can still see in the old city, the remnants of that wall. It's called Hezekiah's Wall. He builds Hezekiah's Tunnel, which is very famous, and they found an inscription in there where the two sides of, the excavators building the tunnel met. That's famous. It's the Hezekiah inscription. The original, I think the copy is in the Israel Museum. The original is in the Istanbul Museum. And I think it's called the Istanbul Museum. But anyway, it's the museum, the museum in Istanbul. Why in Istanbul? Because the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, controlled the land of Israel from the early 1500s through the early 1900s. So that's when that plaque was found, and it was transferred to the museum in Istanbul. At any rate, so the field commander, the Syrian field commander, Sancheriv is an Assyrian. So the field commander calls out to Hezekiah and says, "This is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours?" So now this is Assyria speaking to Israel. So in our case, think of Assyria as Iran, and think of Egypt, which is going to come into play in just a couple of verses, as the United States of America. Egypt was one of the leading powers at the time. Okay, so Assyria was like the Russia of its time, and Egypt was like the America of its time. So Assyria is, let's say, Russia, and Assyria is Iran, and Egypt is like the United States. So this is what the great king, the king of Assyria, says, speaking about Sancheriv. On what are you basing this confidence of yours? You say you have counsel and might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, I know you are depending on Egypt, that splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. And look at the imagery here. Egypt, okay? Hezekiah was counting on Egypt to come bail Jerusalem out of the attack by Sancheriv of Syria. Okay, but Egypt is called a splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. If you lean on Egypt for help, it's not going to help you. Instead of leaning on it, it's going to pierce right through your hand and injure you. Okay, no Christian, no Christian analogies necessary there. Okay, so we'll replace that with the United States in a second, but that's basically what Sanchariv is saying to Hezekiah. But if you say to me, we are depending on Yahweh, our God, isn't he the one whose high places and altars Hezekiah removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you must worship before this altar? Okay, so we're not going to get into that right now. That's a slightly different issue. But now let's replace this. Okay, this is what the great king, the king of, I don't know, Iran, this is what the great Ayatollah, the king of Iran, says. On what are you basing this confidence of yours, Israel? You say you have counsel and might for war, but you speak only empty words. On whom are you depending that you rebel against me? Look, I know you're depending on the United States of America, that splintered reed of a staff which pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. Okay? The United States pierces the hand of anyone who leans on it. Look at those countries in the past who have leaned on the United States and what's happened to them. Afghanistan, okay? They leaned on the United States of America. Look what happened. The United States ran away with its tail between its legs and basically abandoned Afghanistan to the Taliban, who they've been fighting against for God knows how long. Okay, look at Iraq. Okay, the United States, took over Iraq, and nothing good came of that. And any country that the United States that depends on the United States, look at Ukraine is maybe the best example. Okay, look at how Ukraine depended on the United States, and now we see before our very eyes that the United States is essentially in the process of abandoning Ukraine. They're not going to support it anymore. They're basically going to end up saying, we don't have the money to support you guys anymore. You're on your own, and Russia is going to take over. They already, I think, have their front lines conquering, I think it's 3/5 or 2/5 of the country. They may end up with the whole country in their hands. Okay, so anyone who leans on the United States of America for support is going to end up having their hand pierced by that same United States of America. The United States cannot be depended on. And I think, again, I've mentioned this in the past, I think it was Henry Kissinger, if I'm quoting it correctly, who said, it is dangerous to be an enemy of the United States of America, but it's even more dangerous to be a friend of the United States of America. The United States of America is not helping Israel at all. The main goal of the United States of America in this quote unquote war against Gaza is not to help Israel. I don't care, Biden can say all the nice words he wants, but their main goal is to restrain and constrain Israel from truly doing what needs to be done in the Gaza Strip, which is basically flattening it and conquering it. And who the hell cares what happens to any of the inhabitants, any at all? It should be completely irrelevant. They lost their status as human beings. They never had it in my eyes, but they certainly lost it in the eyes of as many Israelis on October 7th, 2023. Okay, so the United States is what Benjamin Netanyahu has relied on for 20 years. That's his God. His God is the same God as the God of Tel Aviv. The United States of America and the West, and the United States of America is not going to help Israel. Their main goal here is to restrain Israel, constrain Israel. There's now an election year coming up. Biden needs the vote in the swing states. One of the swing states that he needs is Michigan. The largest population of Muslims in the United States is found in Michigan, in Dearborn, Michigan. Is basically the Muslim enclave, the biggest Muslim enclave in all of the United States of America. So Biden now has to play two sides. Now, Biden doesn't do anything. Biden's handlers have to play two sides of the issue. On the one hand, he doesn't want to abandon the Muslims. And on the other hand, he doesn't want to abandon the Jews. He needs both their votes. And so what he's going to do is kind of play the middle. He's going to say he supports Israel, but he's going to restrain Israel. And that's his goal. Okay. So because he's restraining Israel, he's now, despite what he says, he's actually putting restrictions on Israel. What restrictions is he putting on Israel? He says he wants them to wrap up the war. He wants them to turn to a low intensity offensive or offense. He doesn't want them to do what they did at the beginning, which was just carpet bomb everything, which is exactly what Israel should be doing to the entire Gaza Strip. They should carpet bomb it into oblivion. Okay, kill them all and let Allah sort them out. So he doesn't. So he's actually restraining Israel. He basically wants Israel to turn to low intensity, targeted offense, and he's putting constraints on Israel. And he wants Israel to wrap up the war soon for whatever his own reasons. So what does that mean? That means that eventually Israel is going to have to either disobey the United States of America, and then the United States of America could potentially cut off weapons to Israel, and then Israel's in deep trouble, or they're going to have to go along and they're going to have to wrap this up without actually taking care of Hamas, which means that either way, they open themselves up to some really horrible future problems, not only from Hamas, but of course from Hezbollah, from Iran, from the militias in Syria, and Iraq, and everyone else is going to pile on as well. So, sorry. So my point is that Israel is in deep doggy doo-doo. They have not wiped out Hamas. I don't think they're going to wipe out Hamas because of everything that's going on. And not only that, they've taken too long. Okay, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, which I've read through a bunch of times. I don't claim to be a Sun Tzu expert, but one of the things he emphasizes is when you have a war, it has to be quick. It has to be started and finished quickly. Look at the 6-day war. I've mentioned this before. What is this going to be? The 6-month war? It's not even the 6-week war. We've way past the 6-week point. The 6-month war, the 6-year war, you cannot have a protracted, prolonged offensive campaign because it empties out the economy. It empties out the pocketbook of the state that's carrying out the war. It Nayesh, how do you say this again in English? The word in English. It drains the energy of the people. It wears them out, psychologically, emotionally, physically, economically. You cannot have a war that lasts 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years. Okay, especially Israel being a small country cannot sustain such a thing. So, and it's already showing its toll. So I think Israel is just kind of petering out in Gaza. I mean, yes, we see that they say they're doing great down there. I don't know. Have they really haven't taken over the Gaza Strip, and there's going to be more and more constraints on them, which they'll listen to from the outside world. And I don't know what the end is going to be there, but it's certainly not going to be what should have been done, which is that Israel should have basically taken over Gaza in about 3 days, flattened the place, killed anyone who needed to be killed, thrown out anyone who decided to run, and take over the place. That's the way you fight a war. That's the way the 6-day war was called. That's why it's called the 6-day war. And that's the way that this war needs to and needed to be fought. And it hasn't been. So now we go to scenario B, which is Israel gets bogged down, runs out of money, runs out of enthusiasm, runs out of morale. And then, then the other players pile on, Hezbollah, etc. And that leads to the eventual end of the current state of Israel. Hence my prediction, the current state of Israel will come to an end at the end of this conflict, whenever it is. I don't know, I don't mean this round, but, within the near future. What does that mean? I don't know. 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. I don't know. As a friend of mine in Jerusalem always used to say, I don't have a stopwatch on me. I don't know exactly when. But this series of events is going to lead to the end of the state of Israel, in my opinion, the current state of Israel, the current secular, America worshiping state of Israel. And that is then going to lead to Benjamin Netanyahu's fate, which is going to be the same as Nicolae Ceausescu, or as what's his face, as Muammar Gaddafi, the half Jew. Okay, that's it. That's what I have to say. That's my monologue. Any comments? Any questions? Agree? Disagree? So, days are coming. Ne'um Yahweh. Yamim ba'im. Ne'um Yahweh. Days are coming, declares Yahweh. Yes, days are certainly coming. Okay. So that being said, let's get into this week's Parsha. I'm just going to go grab some water. The battery's okay for now, so we're good to go. Can I do a sound check? Can you guys hear me? Everybody can hear me okay? Somebody let me know you can hear me. Hello. Can I get a yes or a Y or a hello or a Shabbat Shalom or something? Hello, somebody. Can you guys hear me? Okay. All right, Assistant Prime Minister. If I ever become Prime Minister, you'll be my assistant. You also know how to take care of business. All right, hold on. I'm going to grab some water. And let's get going. I wish I could give, happy, cheery reports about what is going to happen to Israel. But hey, I'm not one of these. I'm not a prophet, and I'm not the son of a prophet. To quote Amos, but using my common sense, I cannot be one of these false quote unquote prophets who just says peace, peace when there is no peace. To quote, is that Micah? It's Micah, maybe not. I can't remember exactly. And this is one of my favorite stories in the Tanakh. Is that of the prophet? Is it Michayahu? A second. I can't find it now. At any rate, I think it's Michayahu is his name. And he refuses to give a good report to Ahab, to Ahav, and that's just the way it is, even though all the false prophets did. Okay, we're going to get into this week's Parsha. We are almost at the end of the book of Genesis. I'm thinking maybe next year, if we're all still here, that the world hasn't ended by then maybe I'm not going to do Parsha by Parsha, because I feel like I'm rushed. It's too much of a rush. Maybe we'll just go through the Torah, start somewhere, start at the beginning and go through at the pace that, at whatever pace is dictated by what we have to say. Okay. But at any rate, this week we're in Parshat Vayigash, Genesis 44. Let me share the screen. Shabbat Shalom, Margaret Franco. Shabbat Shalom, Suri. Okay. Okay, so there we go. So what do we say? Genesis 44. Okay. Yeah, so already, wow. Yeah, we missed a bunch. Let's see. Should I go back a little bit as usual? I think we got up to last time. Yeah, we did Genesis 40. We did Pharaoh's dreams. So maybe we'll start in Genesis 42. This is really where the story starts. So this is the climax of the book of Genesis. If we could say the stories of the patriarchs start with Abraham and Lech Lecha, go from your father's house to a land that I will show you, then the culmination of the book of Genesis is this is like the last scene. This is like the chase scene in a movie, where everything gets wrapped up. This is where all of Abraham's journey, hundreds of years previous, is now wrapped up in this story, which has the sons of Jacob, the 12 sons of Jacob, their wives and their children, ending up in the land of Egypt, which of course sets us up for the book of Exodus, which takes place a couple of hundred years later, not 400 years later in my opinion, but a couple of hundred years later, 200 years later, and the story of the Exodus. So everything is focused towards this climax of the book of Genesis. And there's one particular sentence in the entire book of Genesis which represents that climax, and that's exactly when Joseph says to his brothers, "I am Joseph." And we can even find that. Then we'll go back there. If there's one sentence, if there's one verse that can be considered the climax, like the what's the word? The whole everything in the book of Genesis is pointing towards that one sentence. It's this. It's Genesis 45:3. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? That's it. This here is the climax of the book of Genesis. Everything is leading towards that. After that, it's almost like this tension has been built up, from the Abraham story, up through the Isaac story, up through the Jacob story, up through the story of Joseph. Joseph ending up in Egypt, in jail, getting taken out of jail, becoming second in command of Egypt, the brothers coming down, and then it's all this tension is building up. And with this, it's all like all of the tension is released. And the rest is kind of a downhill, is a downhill coast to the end of the book of Genesis, right? So this is it. This is like the pivot point. This is the sea, the pisca, the climax, the peak of the entire book of Genesis. Genesis 45:3, and you'll see what I mean when we get up to it. Shalom Melech, Shalom Eden Lerange. I like that name. Okay, so but that being said, we're going to backtrack. And by the way, when this happens, I've been in synagogue or reading this line literally brings me to tears. It really does. Sometimes I start tearing up when I read this line. So that's how powerful it is. Okay, so we're going back to what did we say? 41. No, 42. Yeah, we're going to pick it up here. We're going to switch over to the Hebrew. I'm going to try to go fast, but I always say that and I'm never able to. But I will try to kind of go fast and just make minimal comments until we get to our Parsha. Oh, okay. I'm surprised. Mariana Miknana, what are you doing here? You said you're never coming again. Welcome. I'm so happy to see you. Okay. So we're picking it up in Genesis chapter 42. And we're in Genesis chapter 42, verse 1. And here we go. So this is after Joseph is put in charge of Egypt, second in command in Egypt. And of course, there's a famine in all the land. And we see that it says the entire earth. But of course, it couldn't mean the entire earth. It doesn't mean there was a famine. Or it says all the people of all the earth came to Egypt. Well, I don't think people from Patagonia in South America came to Egypt. So it gives us insight to when it says all the earth, that it doesn't necessarily mean all the earth, and that has implications for when it says the entire earth or all the earth was covered with water in the flood of Noah. Again, maybe it just means the area surrounding the land of Israel, that general area. Okay. Verse 42, chapter 42, verse 1. Vayar Yaakov ki yesh shever ba Mitzrayim. Vayomer Yaakov livnao lama titra'u. And I will give kind of a colloquial. I like to generally give colloquial translations. So Yaakov saw that there was food, or literally there was what to buy in Egypt. There was produce or products in Egypt. And this is like, why are you sitting around staring? Why are you sitting around looking at each other? Literally, titra'u, it's the hitpa'el form. It's the hitpa'el form. It means it's the reflexive form. So why are you looking at each other? Is basically what it means. Like, why are you standing around like a bunch of idiots staring at each other? Get out of here. Go get us food. It's basically what Yaakov is saying. Verse 2. Vayomer hine Sham'ati ki yesh shever b'Mitzrayim redu shama v'shivru lana misham v'nichye v'lo namut. And he said, Yaakov said to his sons, I've heard that there is food to buy in Egypt. Go down there, buy some for us from there, and so we can live and not die. You lazy idiots, right? Isn't that what every father thinks about his children at one point or another? You lazy idiots, stop sitting around here. God works in mysterious ways. I like that. Mariana Miknana. So, isn't that what every father thinks about his children at one point or another? What are you stupid, lazy idiots sitting around here staring at us? Get out of here. Go get us some food. You're good for nothings. Yosef. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to purchase grain in Egypt. 10. Why 10? Well, okay. Well, it's going to say in the next verse, actually, so I don't have to explain. ואת בנימין אחי יוסף לא שלח יעקב את אחיו כי אמר פן יקראנו אסון. Jacob did not send Benjamin, the brother of Joseph, because he said, I'm afraid something's going to happen to him. Again, paraphrasing here, to get a more colloquial translation. So Jacob, of course, is worried. Jacob has already lost his favorite wife, his true beloved Rachel, their first son. He believes that Joseph has been torn to shreds by a wild animal because that's what the brothers said. And now he's afraid he's going to lose Rachel's only other son, his only other son that he has from Rachel, Benjamin. Benjamin is also the baby. He's the 12th born out of the 12 sons. And so Jacob says, nope, the baby stays here. My little baby stays here. And the rest of you go down. Okay. Verse 5. But of course, this is going to play, Jacob's decision is going to play a pivotal role in how the story develops, as you already know, or as we shall see. Verse 5. Yavo b'nei Yisrael ishbor b'toch habaim ki haya ra'ab eretz Canaan. And so the children of Israel, the sons of Israel, I should say in this case, the sons of Israel, came to purchase food among all of the other people that had come. Okay, because there was the famine also reached the land of Canaan. Again, I'm not translating word for word. I'm kind of paraphrasing. Okay, verse 6. Yosef hu hashalit al haaretz hu hamashbir l'chol am haaretz v'yavo achei Yosef v'yishtachu lo apayim artza. And Yosef was the ruler over the land, over all of Egypt. Hu hamashbir. The mashbir is, so shever, we saw this word here, shever. So shever means produce, or it really refers to food for purchase. Let's see how do they translate it here. Grain. Okay. So shever is grain or food for purchase. And so Yosef is hamashbir. So if you know biblical Hebrew, there's a verb form called the causative or the hifil. And that means that it causes something to happen. So hamashbir means the one who allows or who causes the grain to be sold. So Yosef is the mashbir. He's basically, the kingmaker. He's the one giving out the grain. He's the one in charge of the distribution of the grain to all those who are coming to purchase from him. This also, hamashbir, also happened to be how do you say it again? Like Macy's and a department store in the center of Jerusalem. So if you wanted to feel like if you wanted to live in Jerusalem, which definitely was not like New York at the time and still isn't, and you wanted to feel like you were like shopping at Macy's or something like that, you went to the Mashbir in the center of Jerusalem, and then you felt like a real American, which all Israelis, that's what they want. They want to feel like they're shopping on Fifth Avenue at I don't know, Tiffany's or Macy's or whatever. So they would go to the Mashbir. That was the name of the store. I don't think it exists there anymore. So Lechol Ama Aretz, but he was the one in charge of selling all the grain. He was the kingmaker. Lechol Ama Aretz, to all the people of the land. Yavo Achei Yosef Yishtachu Lo Apayim Atzah. And the brothers of Yosef came to him and they bowed down and they prostrated themselves with their faces to the ground, literally with their nose on the ground. They kowtowed before Yosef. Okay, so what is interesting about this verse? Can somebody tell me what is so interesting about this verse? How did Yosef end up getting sold into Egypt in the first place? What was it that was the final thing that pissed off the brothers? Do we remember? Well, let's open it up in a new not a new window, a new tab. Genesis. So this is going to be 35, 36, maybe 37 or something like that. Let me go to the English. So remember, Joseph is the dreamer, and he has a dream. He's 17 years old. Genesis 37:5, Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it. Joseph was right. This was an actual prediction of the future. Here it is. This is now, and then of course he has another dream. Then he had another dream, and he told his brothers, listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and the 11 stars were bowing down to me. Okay, well, we don't have the sun and the moon. We don't have his father bowing down to him yet, but let's go with this first dream here, okay? And remember, and okay, so here we have, okay, a dream where the brothers, the sheaves representing the brothers, bow down, prostrate themselves before Joseph, okay? And Joseph was derided. Joseph was hated for this dream. You know, he was called the dreamer. He was thrown into the pit. He was sold to Egypt. His brothers hated him for thinking that he's going to place himself above them, that he's, you know, that his brothers and his mother and father and his brothers are going to bow down. And here it is. That dream was correct. Now, this is the actual isum. How do you say in English? Isum. The actual implementation, the actual coming true of that dream. The brothers of Yosef came and they prostrated themselves with their nose to the ground before Joseph. Okay, this dream in Genesis 37 actually comes true in Genesis chapter 42. Okay. Verse 7. Yar Yosef et Tachau, Uyakirem, Wayit Nakir Elehem. וידבר איתם פשוט, ויאמר אליהם מאין באתם, ויאמרו מארץ כנען לשבור אוכל. So Joseph recognized them. ויתנכר. A nichar is a foreigner or a stranger, someone who's outside. So yitnaker, so he basically pretended not to recognize them. He pretended he didn't know who they were. Would be the way I would interpret that. He pretended to be a stranger to them. Okay? And he said, and he spoke to them harshly. And he said, where have you come from? And they said, from the land of Canaan, from the land of Canaan to purchase food. Grain. Actually, food in this case. And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Okay? So we have here now what is called, I have to think back to high school English. Is it called dramatic irony? Let's see, where the audience knows something a character doesn't. Dramatic irony, right? Remember that from 10th grade English class? We learned about dramatic irony. Dramatic irony refers to the storytelling technique of when the reader knows something a character doesn't. That's exactly the situation here. Okay, Yosef knows the deal. He knows the score. He knows his brothers. We know the score. We know what's going on, but the brothers have no idea what's going on. So we get to see this, you know, from a vantage point that some of the characters in the story, the true story, I'm not trying to say it's a play that's made up, in this true story, don't know. That's the perspective, and that gives us a distinct advantage because we could see how the story evolves, how the story plays itself out. Okay, verse 9. Yosef. And I should say one other thing. Right. So why is Yosef speaking tough to them? I think Yosef, my opinion is I'm very, very sympathetic towards Yosef as I am towards Yaakov. You know, Yosef was put in a very difficult situation. It was on purpose. It was meant to be a growth situation, but Yosef doesn't really know how to handle the situation. We could see this throughout the whole thing. Yes, he kind of comes up with it, devises a plan, but he really doesn't know. He's like torn between the whole thing, between the hatred he has for his brothers for doing what they did, the love he has for his brothers because they're his brothers, the decision that he made to completely separate himself from his father's house. So much so that even when he can, he doesn't even contact his father. And he names his son Menashe, as we mentioned last week. His son Menashe is named after Yosef saying, "So that I may forget my father's house." He just can't deal, right? He needs to have a new identity. We spoke about this last week. He's been placed into a new identity, and he just can't go back at this point. And eventually, he's going to have to go back when his two lives come to a head, which they're starting to right now. Okay, when he sees his brothers, his former life and his current life are now clashing, right? His former life and his current life are now headed on a collision course, which is going to result, of course, in a resolution, which is going to be expressed again in that Yosef revealing himself to his brothers in Genesis 45:6, was it? Which is, that's the climax. That's the big, that's when we can let out all our breaths for all this tension that has been being built up in the story. Okay, so Yosef's two worlds are colliding at this point, and he doesn't really know what to do and how to deal with it. So he kind of alternates between anger and mercy, anger and love, hatred and love, and we'll see this throughout the story. Okay. ויזכור יוסף את החלומות אשר חלם להם, ויאמר אליהם, מרגלים אתם לראות את ערוות הארץ באתם. And Yosef remembered the dreams that he dreamt about them, and he said to them, so now he's being tough, this is his first reaction, okay? He still has this hatred towards his brothers, rightfully so, after all they did to him, okay? Miraglim atem, you're spies. You've come to spy out, literally it says the nakedness of the land, but you've come to figure out our weaknesses. Okay? Literally, you've come to see the nakedness of the land. Okay, verse 10. ויאמרו אליו, לא אדוני, ועבדיך באו לשבר אוכל. And they said to him, no, master. We've come just to purchase food. Verse 11. כולנו בני איש אחד. אנחנו כנים, אנחנו לא היו עבדיך מרגלים. So now, for the first time, the brothers are going to mention the father. Yosef has tried to forget his father. He loved his father. He was his father's favorite son. They were close, extremely close, right? They were inseparable. And he's tried to forget his father. Remember, his first son, Menashe, sorry, that's actually his second son. His second son, Menashe, is named after this idea. First son. Menashe is named after this idea of forgetting his father's house. Okay? 11. Kulanu b'nei ish echad. We are all the son of one man. Nachnu kenim. We are honest men. We are honest people. Nachnu lo hayu avedecha meraglim. We are your servants. We're not spies. Okay? Or we, your servants, are not spies. Verse 12. V'yomer alehem lo. No, I know that you've come here to spy out the nakedness of the land. Verse 13. ויאמרו שנים עשר עבדיך אחים אנחנו בני איש אחד בארץ כנען והנה הקטון את אבינו היום ואחד איננו. And they said, שניים עשר עבדיך אחים אנחנו. We are 12 brothers. We're the son of one man from the land of Canaan, and the smallest one, and Yosef knows exactly who that is, obviously, that's his little brother Binyamin, from his mother, who's his now dead mother. Remember, Rachel died on the road to Ephrat, near Hebron, and she gave birth to Benjamin as she was dying. That was basically, she died in childbirth, giving birth to Joseph's little brother from his only brother from his mother, not a brother from another mother, a brother from the same mother, Benjamin. Okay. So Benjamin is back with our father, and there's one who's no longer exists. He's no longer around. And of course, Yosef knows exactly who they're referring to. They're referring to him. They're sitting here telling Yosef that he's not around. Okay, the irony here, and again, the dramatic irony of us understanding exactly what's going on here, Joseph understanding exactly what's going on here, and the brothers have no idea what's going on here. Okay, so the dramatic tension in the story is just built up brilliantly. It's just built up brilliantly by the Torah. Verse 14, Vayomer alehem Yosef hu asher dibarti alechem lemor meraglim atem. And Yosef continues, he insists, he says, no, and I'm paraphrasing, Vayomer alehem Yosef, and Joseph said to them, hu asher dibarti, it is exactly as I said to you, lemor meraglim atem, is exactly as I already said to you, you're spies. Okay? So Yosef is really, he's going to take some revenge. He's out. He hates them for what he still hates them for what they did to him, and he's gonna take some revenge. And I don't think he knows where this is all heading yet. I think he's kind of figuring it out as he goes along. Verse 15, Bezot, bahenu, hey, paro, im titzu mize, ki im bavo achichem akaton hena. Okay? And he says, okay. He says, you're spies. I believe you're spies. Okay, but I'm going to give you a test. Okay, you could prove yourselves. Bezot tibachenu. In this, you can prove yourselves. Again, paraphrasing. Hey, paro, by the life of paro. So he takes an oath. We see this many times, an oath being taken in. Usually it's the name of a god or the name of a king. In this case, it's the name of a king, but we know the Egyptian kings, they considered themselves gods. Okay, so obviously at this time in Egypt, if you took an oath, you took an oath on the name of Pharaoh, which was like taking an oath on the name of God. You'll see throughout the Tanakh that when Israelites take an oath, a true oath, they will take an oath on the name of Yahweh. So instead of Chei Paro, it would say Chei, and then the tetragrammaton, the name of God. Okay, I'm not going to say it here because I don't want to take any oaths, even though obviously that's not the context, but I won't even say it. Okay, so Chei Paro, okay, as Paro lives, that's an oath, that's a swear, a solemn oath being taken. Okay, I solemnly swear to you is basically saying it's like, I swear on my mother's life. That's exactly the same thing. I swear on Pharaoh's life. Okay, im titsumizeh. Okay, that the only way you're going to get out of this, ki im bavo achichem akaton hena, is if you bring, or if your little brother comes here. Okay, so now Yosef is really, he's turning the screws. Hold on a second. The neighbor is knocking on the door. 1 second. I'll be right back. All right, we're back. So the only way you're going to get out of this is if your little brother comes here. Okay, so Yosef is really turning the screws. Okay, and he's not only hurting, he's really out to hurt his brothers, because he knows how much this is going to hurt his father, and he's trying to hurt his brothers through hurting his father, basically. And he also wants to see his little brother Benjamin. There's so much more to say about it, but I want to go through. Okay. ואסוף אותם אל משמר שלושת ימים. And he gathered them, or he basically placed them in jail for 3 days. Okay, so he's trying to show now he's serious. Okay, he is not messing around. Verse 18. Wayomer Elem Yosef Bayom Shlishi, and places them in jail. Again, I'm speculating here, but maybe he wants them to feel a little bit of what he went through for 13 years. He was placed in jail at the age of 17. He came out at the age of 30. Joseph was in jail for 13 years, and maybe he wants them to feel just a little bit of what it felt like, what they ended up causing to happen. Of course, they didn't directly cause him to be in jail. It was the wife of Potiphar that caused that to happen, but he wanted them to feel a bit of, just a little taste of what he went through, of all the pain and suffering that he went through for 13 years. 1 second, please. Okay, sorry about that. Another distraction. Okay. So he puts them in jail for 3 days, the 10 brothers. Verse 18, why yomer alehem Yosef bayom shlishi, zot asu, wahyu, et Elohim ani yareh. Okay, so Yosef says to them on the third day, do this and you will live, because I'm a God-fearing man. Okay, in other words, I don't want to kill you. I have mercy. I'm a God-fearing man. I'm not going to kill innocent people. If you're really innocent, I'm not going to hurt you. Okay, but you have to prove that you're innocent. Okay, and Yosef says, I'm a God-fearing man, right? That's the way he justifies it. He is a God-fearing man. Okay, but there's a lot of irony in this statement here. Verse 19, Im kenim atem achichem echad ya'aser bebeit mishmarchem wa'atem lechu habiu shever ra'avon betechem. I'll read verse 20 because it's really connected. Wa'et achichem hakaton tabiu elai ve'ye'amnu divrechem velo tamutu ve'ya'asuchen. Okay, so this is the deal. So Yosef, first of all, he puts them in jail. I think he's trying to figure out, first of all, he wants them in jail because he wants them to feel, again, as I said, I think this is again speculation. I think he wants them to feel a little bit of the pain and suffering that he went through for 13 years being in jail. But now he takes those 3 days, he tries to figure out a plan. Okay, so he's figuring out a plan. Okay, this is the plan he comes up with. Okay, he says, okay, listen, I'm not going to kill you guys. Okay, if you're telling the truth, I fear God. I don't kill innocent people. Now you have to prove it to me. Okay, verse 19. In kenim atem achichem echad ya'aser bebeit mishmarchem. If you're speaking the truth, okay, if you're honest people, then one of your brothers will stay here in jail. Okay, will stay here under my guard. V'tem lechu aviu shever ra'avon betechem. You, the rest of you, okay, can go back and bring food for your hungry household. Again, just paraphrasing here. Verse 20. And when you come back with your little brother. In that way, and so you will test the validity. You'll show that your words are true. Okay, and you will not die. Okay, and so they did. Okay, so that's the deal. Yosef figures out after 3 days that's what he's going to do. So he gives them food. So they're not going to starve, okay? His father's not going to starve. The brothers are not going to starve. Benjamin's not going to starve. And whoever stays behind is not going to starve because he's in Egypt, okay? But next time you come back with your little brother Benjamin. Prove that you're telling the truth. Of course, again, Yosef has a lot of ulterior motives here. He wants to torture them. He wants to pay them back for the pain and suffering they caused them, for the unfair pain and suffering they caused them. Okay, was it fair? Was it unfair? You know, maybe both at the same time. That's a very biblical answer. And he also wants to see his little brother Benjamin. More than anything else, he wants to see his little brother Benjamin. And we'll see the way he acts towards his brother Benjamin. Okay, verse 21. V'yamru ish el hao, aval ashemim anachnu al achinu asher ra'inu tzarat nasho. And now they say right in front of Joseph, again, this is the dramatic irony continuing. They say to each other, this is because we're guilty. Again, I'm paraphrasing. Literally, it says, but we are guilty. Okay? On the brother. This is obviously because we are guilty over what we did to our brother. We saw the suffering, the pain and suffering we saw his suffering, and he even when he begged us, and we did not pay attention to it. Okay, and we did not pay attention. This is why these problems, this trouble, this trouble has come upon us. Okay, and Yosef hears this. He hears their thoughts out loud, and again, we know they're speaking Hebrew. Yosef understands Hebrew, obviously, because he grew up in his father's household. But we're going to see again later on that he pretends not to understand Hebrew. Okay, this is a trick I play all the time. by the way, I'll be in a situation where let's say I'll hear Israeli speaking, or I know one or two other languages as well. I'll hear people speaking a certain language, and I'll pretend that I don't know the language. Okay, but we'll use the example of Israel. When I want to find out what people are saying, I'll just play dumb. I'll play dumb American tourist. Okay, I don't know a word of Hebrew. I'll pretend. Okay, and I'll just listen to the Israelis. It could be a very mundane thing. Okay, it could be, I don't know. Let's say at the shuk, at the marketplace. Two Israelis talking, where I get a kind of weird feeling about them, and they're saying, oh, this, maybe they'll say in Hebrew, oh, this stupid American, he's used to buying tomatoes for $10 a kilo. So instead of selling it for $1 a kilo, we'll tell them it's $5 a kilo. They'll say that to each other in Hebrew. I'm making it up. It's actually never happened, but this kind of thing, right? And I'll understand every word they're saying. They don't understand a word I'm saying, but they don't know that I understand every word they're saying, right? But so they can speak. They can speak freely. Okay, this is exactly the same kind of situation that's going on here. And of course, Yosef understands every word they're saying. They hear him saying, they hear him basically, he hears them basically expressing, I don't know if I'd call it, repentance at this point, but definitely regret. Okay, they realize that this has happened because of what they did to their brother Yosef. Okay, they have a guilty conscience, and they're expressing that guilty conscience. They're expressing the fact that they realize that they did something wrong. And that's already a step towards the reconciliation between Yosef and his brothers. Remember, Yosef is very conflicted here. Okay, he hates them and he loves them both at the same time. And slowly but surely, he's gonna kind of prove them, and then he's able to get rid of by proving them, by putting them, through the ringer, making them jump through, the rings of these various rings of fire. They're going to prove themselves, and that's going to help him dissipate the anger. And then the anger eventually that he has towards them, the hatred that he has towards them, is going to eventually turn into love, because he's going to see that they have actually repented, that they really feel sorry for what they did to their brother. And that's going to come out through the story. And this is the first step. Okay, this is the first stage where he sees the brothers expressing some kind of regret for their actions against him, and he cannot dissipate his hate. He cannot release his hate towards them. He has both love and he has both hate towards them. They're his brothers. He loves them, but he hates them for the way they betrayed him, for what they did to him. Even though one could claim that they had a reason. Maybe they went overboard. They were young, but they kind of had a reason for doing what they did. I mean, he really, really pissed them off. I mean, if Yosef, 17-year-old Yosef, could write a book called How Not to Win Friends and Not Influence People. I mean, he did everything he could to completely piss them off. Okay? All right. Let me just make sure we're live on YouTube. Just for 1 second here. Whoa. Just give me 1 second, please. Come on. Should be. Yeah, it's just, okay, there it is. Whoa. Whoa. That's the one. Okay, yeah, we're live on YouTube. Okay. All right. So can you guys hear me? Can I do a sound check? Does everybody hear me? Does anybody have any comments? Anybody have anything? Anybody? It's such a powerful story. I mean, as I was saying yesterday to a close friend, I was saying that there are no stories like there are in the Tanakh. The stories in the Tanakh are more powerful than any movie you could ever watch, any book you can ever read, because they're these true stories. Yesterday, I was listening in Hebrew to the Book of Ruth, and it's just such a powerful story. And then I was listening afterwards to the Book of Jonah. It's just, these are such powerful stories. They really capture you in ways that stories that are just like, movies or made up books just can't capture you. Okay, good. Verse 21. Okay, so yeah, we read that. Verse 22. ויען ראובן אותם לאמור, הלא אמרתי עליכם, לאמור, אל תחטאו בילד, ולא שמעתם רם דמו, הנה נדרש. And Reuven said to them, didn't I tell you, okay, didn't I tell you guys, okay, don't commit this horrible sin against the child, and you didn't listen to me, and now we're paying, our blood is being required for this. In other words, we're getting paid back for what we did with our blood. We shed his blood, and now our blood is going to be shed, perhaps. Okay, and remember, if you remember, Reuven, okay, came up with the idea they were gonna kill Yosef. Okay, and Reuven said no. Okay, just throw him in a pit and leave him here. And Reuven's plan, Reuven is the firstborn, okay, and he's acting like the firstborn here. Back then he does, and we'll see again he does here. Okay, Reuven said no, just throw him and leave him in the pit. Okay, let our hands not be on it. Let our hands not shed his blood. Okay, we're not going to shed our own brother's blood. And Reuven's idea was to leave him in the pit and then come back, take him, bring him back to his father, and that was going to be the end of the incident. Okay, so Reuven was really the only one who wanted no part of this from the beginning. Of course, when Reuven came back, or when they were looking from far away, they saw the Ishmaelites come, the Midianites, I guess. No, the Ishmaelites come and pull Yosef out of the pit, and then bring him towards Egypt. Okay, so Reuven really never wanted part of this to begin with. He never wanted any part of this, and now he's speaking up and he said, "I told you. Okay, remember when we threw Yosef into the pit? I told you not to do this. Do not sin against him this way. And now our blood is being, we're paying back. We're going to pay back with our own blood. We shed his blood, or we intended to shed his blood. Okay, and now that could happen to us. Okay, verse 23. Im lo yadu ki shomea Yosef ki hamelitz benotam. And they didn't know that Yosef understood, that Yosef heard everything they were saying. Ki hamelitz benotam, because there was a translator between them. So Yosef is, he's playing the role of Egyptian, second in command of Egypt. He's speaking Egyptian, and there's a translator translating back and forth when he needs to speak with these Canaanites, these Hebrews. Then there's a translator translating back and forth between Egyptian and Hebrew. Okay, but of course Yosef understands every word, and that's the dramatic irony here. Verse 24. Why yisov me'alehem wayev. וישב אליהם וידבר אליהם ויקח מאיתם את שמעון יסר אותו לעיניהם. So Joseph turned away from them. Okay, he went like in the back room or something like that, or just turned away somewhere he couldn't be seen. Wayev, and he started crying. Okay, so again, Joseph is torn. His two worlds. We have to understand. I'm telling you, you could make up an entire book just on this story here. Okay, you can make a volume of books. Yosef is torn. His two worlds are colliding. The world that he tried to forget. He was ripped away from his childhood home, from his childhood family. At the age of 17, he was sold. He was brought to a new land. He was taught a new language, learned a new culture, thrown into jail for 13 years, okay? And he was basically forced into a new life, and he wanted to forget his old life. He wanted nothing to do with his old life. He couldn't, okay? Imagine if that happened to you. I gave the example of the hostages, the Israeli hostages that were taken to Gaza, especially the women, okay? If the women were not or are not, I think there's still some women in Gaza. There are definitely some women in Gaza, some of the female soldiers, and I think there's some civilians, although, there's no distinction in my eyes, not for the Gazans and not for the Israelis. They're all of the soldiers are the sons and daughters of Israel. But at any rate, there's still women in Gaza. And they've been ripped away from their families. They've been ripped away, suddenly and violently from the life they knew. And if they're not returned, there will come a certain point. It's horrible to say. There will come a certain point where they will integrate into Gazan society, because that's what you have to do. You have to adapt. You have to adapt to your surroundings, okay? And especially women, they tend to take on the identity of whatever household they become part of. So let's use the women as an example, okay? The men maybe less so, okay? But the women, if they're taken as wives, if they're not returned, and this is a horrible thing to say, but it's absolutely 100% true. If they're taken as wives by the Gazans, if they're not eventually returned, they will be taken as wives or concubines, basically sex slaves, concubines by Gazan men, and they will end up having to forget their old lives. Because what can you do in that case? Let's say you've now been, I don't want to get too graphic, but you've now been slept with by a Gazan, and you now have children with that Gazan. What are you going to do at that point? You're going to run away and go back to your old life? That's it. Your old life is gone. Okay? This is a new chapter in your life, whether you like it or not. Okay? And you have to, the only way you can survive in such a case is, as horrible as it sounds, is embrace your new life and forget your own life. Okay? This is exactly what's happened with Joseph. Okay? Joseph was forced violently and suddenly into a new life that he never wanted, he never planned for, he never intended to have, but that's life. Life is full of surprises, and life is, fate is brings you the completely unexpected. And he was forced into this new life, he's forced into this new identity, and he had to forget his old life. Okay, a lot of people, and I'm sorry to say, they're kind of stupid, I think. A lot of even commentators, will blame Joseph for not contacting his father. Why, when he got out of jail, when he rose to second in command in Egypt, why didn't he immediately send messengers to his father and say, "It's Joseph, I'm alive"? He couldn't. Psychologically speaking, he couldn't. He now had a new identity, a new life. He couldn't go back. Once you're ripped away from your old life and you've invested yourself in your new life, whether you've done it voluntarily or because you've been forced to, you have no choice but to embrace that new life, because it's the only way you can survive. Okay? So Joseph couldn't, and now we have his two lives. When those brothers came, that must have been like a hammer right over the head, because his new life that he's embraced for the past, 13 plus, we had 7 years of famine, and then a couple of years of, for the past 25 years or so. 25 years is a long time, from the age of 17 to around, let's say, the age of 40, he is approximately now. Okay, let's say 23 years. Okay, that's his new life. That's his new identity. He's an Egyptian. He's an Egyptian slave, and now he's second in command of Egyptian. He even has an Egyptian name, Sapna Paneah. Okay, he can't bring himself to go back to his old life. And again, I think the clearest proof of that is what we see, and I mentioned it last week, if I can find it now, is what he names his firstborn son, Menashe. Let's just find that for a second. 41. No, it's before this. It's right at the end of 41. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Genesis 41:51. Joseph named his firstborn Menashe, and he said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." There you go. Okay. He names his first son basically forgetfulness, or I've forgotten. Okay. Let's look at that in the Hebrew. That's Genesis 41:51. And maybe some of you have faced this in your own. I think we all have faced this in our own lives, one way or another, where fate has brought us to a certain situation. Fate has brought us to a certain situation that we didn't expect. We had to embrace our new identity. Okay. I don't know. Let's give another example. Let's say someone, lost a limb or had cancer. Horrible. I mean, lo aleinu, but let's say it happened. Suddenly you have a new identity. Okay. My new identity is not me, but one's new identity is, I'm now a paraplegic, God forbid. Okay. Or I now am a cancer patient, God forbid. Okay. That's a new chapter in your life. You didn't want, you didn't ask for it. It was brought upon you by fate, or for whatever reason. And now you have no choice but to embrace it. And now let's say you've embraced your identity as, I don't know, I'll use the example of a paraplegic. Okay. You've embraced your identity as a paraplegic. You've gone on television and you've advocated for paraplegics. You've started a new charity, for paraplegics. And, this goes on for 10 years, and suddenly a new miracle cure comes along. And it turns out that we can, your limbs can be restored. You can go back to just the way you were. You can walk and use all of your, I guess paraplegic means legs, right? You can use your limbs again and you could walk. Okay. Would you do it? Would you do it? I mean, probably yes, but it would create this great conflict in any normal person. It would create this great conflict in their life. Like, okay, I've invested so much. This has become my identity. Okay, I'm an paraplegic. I'm an advocate for paraplegics. I'm identify as a paraplegic. And now you're telling me all this was from nothing, and now I can go back to walking, right? This is kind of what Yosef is going through. And I think that it's just brushed over. People don't understand the incredible hammer over Joseph's head, that this was one of his brothers came down, and this is the first time he's seen them in over 20 years. Okay? His old life, which he tried to forget, which he had to forget to survive, is colliding with his new life, which he's been forced into for the past 25 or so years. Okay? And so we said that was 44. Where was it again? Let's look at this. 44:51. I'm sorry, 41:51. Okay. So he gives birth to two sons. Vayikra. This is 41:51. Vayikra Yosef et Shema Bechor, and he named the firstborn Menashe. Ki nasheni Elohim et kol amali, because God made me forget. Nasheni. Okay. Made me forget. Okay, et kol amali, all of my suffering, vet kol beit avi, and all of my entire father's house. Okay, that's what he names his first son. He names his first son Nasheni Menashe, forgetfulness, or I must forget, or something along those lines. Okay, so this is what Yosef is going through, and I think it's so important to understand it to us. I think it's so important for us to understand it from Yosef's point of view, because the only way you can really, at the end of the day, understand Yosef and understand the decisions that he's making and how he's torn at this point between hatred for his brothers for what they did to him and love for his brothers because they're his brothers, between wanting to, between some ancient, calling back to his roots, to be back with his family, to be back with his father, but his inability to do so because he's now been forced into this new situation. He's now embraced this new identity. He's been forced to embrace this new alternate identity for the past 20, 25 years. Okay? This is how we have to understand the story. We have to understand the story in this context, or we'll never understand the story. We'll never understand why Yosef treats his brothers the way he does, why he needs to put them through the ringer, why he needs them to jump through a bunch of rings of fire, because the only way that he can forgive them is when he sees they're truly sorry. Other than that, he cannot release his anger towards them, his hatred towards them, and until he releases his anger and hatred towards them, he cannot resolve those two identities. And when he reveals himself, again, we see this in Genesis chapter 45, verse 6, when he finally says, I am Joseph, is my father still alive? Okay? When he says that, that is, again, that's the seed, that's the piska, that's the climax of the entire book of Genesis. The entire book of Genesis leads towards Genesis chapter 45, verse 6, when Joseph says, I am Joseph, okay? Is my father still alive? That's when Joseph is finally able to release his anger towards his brothers. He's able to realize that his brothers have done true repentance, that they're truly sorry for the acts they've committed. They've proven themselves by their actions, as we shall see. And only when he sees that is he able to release his anger towards them, his hatred towards them, and is he able to then resolve and what's the word? Shalev. He's able to integrate these two identities that he has, these two lives that he's lived, the one of being the Hebrew son and the one of being the Egyptian slave, and then the Egyptian, second in command of Egypt. And it's just such a powerful story. You can't make this up. I mean, if there's any proof that the Torah is true, it's these kinds of stories. You cannot make a story like this up, okay? That's why if you ever watch movies, the best movies are when it says this movie is based on a true story, right? And even then they take a lot of, liberties with the story, but it just rings true, everything that Yosef is going through. So let's keep this in mind as the story develops. Let's understand what's going on here, okay? And let's understand how that leads to the way the story develops, and that Yosef is torn. He's torn at this point, okay? He was forced out of his old life into his new life, and now he's being forced out of his new life to confront his old life. He's being forced to recognize and to reconnect with his old life after he said, I'm never going to do that again. Okay? Menashe, Nasheni, Yahweh me amali or me bet avi. Okay? My firstborn is named forgetfulness, or make me forget, because I want to forget my old life, my suffering, and my entire father's house. Okay? I have to separate myself from that. And that's why Yosef did not contact his father. That's why Yosef, the second he got out of jail, you would say, what's wrong with this guy? Send a letter to your father. Send a messenger, the second command of Egypt. Go send a letter to Jacob saying, I'm fine, I'm okay. He couldn't. He couldn't. It just psychologically could not do that. Okay. Let's move on. Any questions, any comments? Yes, God was with him in that dark place. Absolutely, Margaret. Okay. Alrighty. So where were we? Right. So Yosef cries. So Yosef is going, he's trying to deal with this whole situation now. Verse 25, Waitzau Yosef, Wayim Alu. Et klehem bar, we lashiv, aspem ish el sako, ulatet lehem seda, laderech v'yas lehem chen. I'm sorry, we skipped a verse. Verse 24, Yisov, me'alehem v'yev, v'yeshav elehem v'yedaber elehem. So after he cried, he went in the private room and cried for a while. After he wiped his tears, and got all the redness out of his eyes, he came back and he said to them, He took Shimon. He said and right in front of their eyes, he put him in jail. He incarcerated them right in front of the other brothers' eyes. Why Shimon? Why Shimon? Anybody? Why Shimon? Going once, going twice. Shimon, where is he among the 12 brothers? He's the second born. Okay? What did he just hear Reuven say? He heard Reuven say, okay, I told you not to do this. He knows Reuven had no part in this. So he's not going to incarcerate Reuven. That wouldn't be fair. Reuven had nothing to do with this. Reuven was trying to, to save Joseph. Second after Reuven, in the order of the brothers, is Shimon. Shimon is the second born. Okay? That's why he takes Shimon. Verse 25. I'm sorry, we just read this, so let me translate. So Yosef he issued a command, and he filled all of their bags, their vessels with grain, and he returned their money, each man into his own sack, into his own bag, his own knapsack, whatever. And he gave them enough provisions for the road. So basically, he gave them all the food they can eat when they get back there, and he also returned their money, and he also gave them extra food for their journey home. Okay. So now let's see what happens. So Yosef, up here, he's expressing his hatred. He's speaking tough to them. He's putting Shimon in jail. And here he's expressing his love. At the end of the day, they're his older brothers. He loves them. Okay. And so he gives them all their money back. He doesn't want any money from them. He gives them extra food, right? He loves them. So he's torn between this love-hate relationship, which has to be resolved. Verse 26, and they took that which they purchased up on top of their donkeys, and they got out of Dodge. Verse 27, and one of the brothers opens up his sack, his knapsack, in order to give provender. I think they usually translate it as mispo. It just means food for animals, feed, to his donkey, Malon, at the inn, at the desert inn, at the caravanserai. Maybe this is the Dunkervanserai, at the caravanserai, right? Some inn, some desert inn. V'yar et kaspo, and he saw that his money was there in the at the opening of his knapsack. Okay, in other words, he opened up a sack and there was money on top of it. Okay, verse 28. Okay, so which one of these brothers? Who knows? Okay, we have Shimon's in jail. Binyamin is back home. Yosef is in Egypt. Okay, so 12 minus 3, there are 9 other brothers. We don't know which one. Okay, so one of the 9 brothers. There are 9 brothers now traveling back to Jacob. ויאמר אל חו, חשב כספי וגם הנה בעם תחתי. He says to his brothers, my money's been returned. It's right here in my knapsack. ויצא ליבם ויחרדו ויחרדו איש אל חו אחיו לאמור מה זאת עשה אלוהים בנו. And he said to his brothers, my money's been returned. It's right here at the top of my knapsack. Literally their heart went out. It basically means they were flabbergasted. Like, it's like when you find out something horrible has happened. Okay? And they expressed fear, or they literally shook, or they trembled. Okay, but they each one to his brother was expressed fear, or was in fear. And they said, what is this that God has done to us? Okay, so they see this as, again, a continuation of their punishment for what they did to Joseph. What has God done to us is their first reaction. Okay, again, from our point of view, we know exactly what's going on, but they have no idea. Verse 29. ויבואו אל יעקב אביהם ארצה כנען ויגידו לו את כל הקורות אותם לאמור. So they go back to Jacob in Canaan and they tell Jacob everything that's happened to them. Verse 30. דיבר האיש אדוני הארץ איתנו קשות ויתן אותנו כמרגלים את הארץ. So the Lord of the land spoke to us harshly, and he accused us of spying out the land, of being spies. Verse 31. ונאמר אליו כנים אנחנו לא היינו מרגלים. And we said to him, we're honest men, we're not spies. Verse 32. 12 אנחנו אחים בני אבינו האחד איננו. אבינו האחד איננו והקטן היום את אבינו בארץ כנען. So he said, we're not spies. We're 12 brothers, the sons of our father, our single father, okay, or our father. Echad enenu, one is gone. And the little baby, the little one, is back with his father. Is back with our father in the land of Canaan. Big mistake. Sometimes it's best to keep your mouth shut. And the brothers spilled the beans. I mean, Joseph already knew. But Yaakov thinks, well, we'll see what happens. Verse 33, ויאמר אלינו האיש אדוני הארץ, בזאת אדע כי כנים אתם אחיכם האחד, הניחו איתי ואת רעבון בתיכם תקחו לכו. And he said to us, and this man who's the master over the land said to us, I'm going to test you. Again, I'm paraphrasing here. בזאת אדע כי כנים אתם. Through this, I will know whether you are honest men, whether you are honest, okay? Okay, leave one of your brothers here with me. And literally the famine of your household, take and go. Okay, so this is Ra'avon Betechem. This is actually a very, very interesting kind of way or structure, grammatical structure in Hebrew, where it doesn't literally what it says here, and I'll just dwell very briefly on this. Okay. Literally it says, and the hunger of your households, take and go. What does it mean, the hunger of your households? Okay. It doesn't mean, there's a structure in Hebrew which means the outcome of the hunger or the resolution of your hunger. We see this sometimes with the word milacha. I have to think of where exactly the verse is, but it doesn't mean the work itself. It means the outcome of the work. So in other words, the resolution of your hunger of your households, take and go, meaning the food that I've given you. Okay, but literally, if we were to take this literally, it would say that the hunger of your households, take and go. But it really means the resolution for the hunger of your households, take and go. And I forgot that there's an official name for that grammatical structure in Hebrew. We don't have such a thing in English. Maybe we do. I'd have to think of an example, but it's a very unique structure to biblical Hebrew. Verse 34. And bring your little brother back to me. And I'll know, and that way I'll know that you're not spies, but that you're honest men. وَإِتْ هَآرِتْ تِسْحَرُ. And then I'll give your brother back to you, meaning Shimon, Simeon, Simeon, who's in jail. وَإِتْ هَآرِتْ تِسْحَرُ. And you can, trade, you can carry out trade in the land. In other words, you can buy more food. Okay. Verse 35, he, him, mirikim sakehem, wahine ish sror kasbo, bisako, wa yiru et sroroth kasbehem, hema wa avihem, wa yira'u. Okay, so remember, one brother at the caravanserai, at the desert inn, opened up a sack, found the money on top, and said, what is God doing to us? Now they get back to Jacob. They all open up their sacks. They all see their money on top of their food there. And they and their father see it. And now they fear. Okay? Now they have no idea what's going on. Something weird is going on, and they're scared. Okay? Their brother's in jail. Their little brother, they have to take back to Egypt in order to prove that they're honest people. Their money has been given back to them. What the heck is going on here? And all they can think is that this is some kind of punishment for all that they did to Joseph. Okay, so they are relating this back. Oh, I have to plug in. So I'll finish off this chapter and then I'll plug in. Verse 36. Why yomer elem Yaakov avihem? Oti shikaltem Yosef enenu wa Shimon enenu v'ed Binyamin tikachu elai alai hayu kulana. Okay, and so Jacob says to them, Jacob their father says to them, you've bereaved me of Joseph. I'm sorry, you've bereaved me. Joseph is no more. Shimon is no more. And now you're going to take from me Benjamin. You're going to take Benjamin away from me. Hayu kulana. It's always a tough one to translate. And enough is enough. Maybe is a good translation. Let's see how the NIV translates it. So it's 42:36. 42. $36. Everything's against me. Okay. No one really knows how to translate that one. Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. I got to plug in a second, so we'll see how Robert Alter translates it, and then I'm going to go plug in and take a break. Okay. So again, that's Genesis 42:36, and we'll look at Everett Fox. Let me just make sure everything's working here. Yes. $42.36. Upon me has all this come. That's how Everett Fox translates it. And Robert Alter translates it as $36. It is I who bear it all. I mean, his translations are usually the best, in all fairness. So let's go back to the Hebrew. Binyamin tikhu elai hayu. Et Binyamin tikhu elai hayu kulana. I would translate this as like enough is enough. Like, I've had enough. I don't know. It's a tough one to translate. Anyway, get the idea. Let me see. Wayomer Ruvain. So Ruvain, the firstborn, now steps up. Ruvain, throughout this entire story with Joseph, he's been a good dude, right? He's going to get knocked off his perch as firstborn because he slept with his father's concubine, with Bilhah. But Ruvain is acting as the firstborn should. He's the adult in the room, always, okay? Verse 37, Yomer Ruvain el aviu, lemor et shnei banai, tamid im lo avienu elecha, tna Oto al yadi wa ani ashivenu elecha. Okay, so Reuben steps up to the plate. I got to plug in right now. Okay, I'm going to take a break, and we'll be right back. Actually, let me plug in, and then finish the chapter. Okay, we're plugged in. So let me finish this chapter, and then we'll take a little bit of a break. Okay. ויאמר ראובן אל אביו לאמור את שני. Okay. So Reuben says to his father, לאמור את שני בניי תמית אם לא אביאנו אליך. You can kill my two sons if I don't bring him back to you. Speaking of a Benjamin. תנח אותו על ידי. Place him in my hands. Put him in my hands. ואני אשיבנו אליך, and I will bring him back to you. So Reuben is basically, he's swearing on the lives of his children, of his two sons, that he's going to bring Benjamin back. Okay? But Jacob, and understandably so, says, Wayomer lo yered beni imachem ki achiu met wahu levado nishar u karahu ason b'derech asher tilchu ba וhoradtem et sevati biyaron sheola. And so Jacob responds, Lo yared b'ni imachem, my son will not go down to Egypt with you. Ki achiu mate, because his brother's already dead. His brother's dead. And he's the only one who remains. What does that mean, the only one who remains? It means the only one of Rachel, his beloved wife Rachel, his beloved Rachel. With Karawason, and if some tragedy should happen to him, but on the way, on the way that basically on the way, literally you will have brought down my, they usually translate sevati, my hoary head. Seva means like old age. They usually translate this one as hoary head. We can look at some of the translations. You will bring down my white head, my white-haired head, Yaron Sheola, in agony, down into the grave. Okay, basically you're going to kill me. Okay, you're going to kill your old man. It's basically what they're saying. Okay, if anything happens to him, I'm not going to let him go, because if anything happens to him, you're going to kill your old man. Okay, you're going to kill me. It's literally what he says. I mean, not literally, but that's what he says. Okay. This is an interesting verb form. Horadatem. So horadatem is the perfect or the past tense. Horadatem. You brought down. So you brought down your old man into the grave in agony. And the this is the vav haifuch. This is what's called the conversive vav. It changes the perfect to the imperfect, or the imperfect to the perfect. In this case, to put it in very simple terms, it's changing the past into the future. So we could read this as, okay, you will bring down my white head in agony to the grave. Okay, but it doesn't mean you will. It means you will have. And again, this just shows the way that Hebrew tenses work. Okay. The imperfect, well, it's not the imperfect, the perfect with the conversive vav, which converts it to the essentially to the future can take on a lot of different moods. So it can be the future perfect, and all kinds of other different similar moods depending on the context. So this should best be translated not as you will, but you will have taken my white head down to the grave in agony. Okay, that's the end of chapter 42. Any questions, any comments before we take a little break and then go on? Anybody? Are you guys enjoying the study? Yeah. Anybody home? Okay, well, we're going to take a break for maybe about 10 minutes or so. And then we will continue on with chapter 43. Again, today's parsha really starts only in chapter 44, but I don't care. I'll get as far as I can get. And especially with this story, this is so important. This is so crucial to understand exactly, how Genesis resolves itself, how the book of Genesis resolves itself, that I'd rather take time on this. Okay, so let me put up the appropriate signs and banners. Let's see here. We got that. We got that. Got that. We got that. Okay, I guess let's start it up again. Let me turn on the camera. Alrighty. Yep. Okay. Let's do that. Let's do that for a moment. Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. Stop screen. Present. Let me get rid of YouTube. Yep. Chrome did it again. I don't know why it's happening. It only happens when I'm running the streaming program, Streamyard. I don't know why it happens. It happens every week, at least once, and it lasts for about 5 minutes. So that's why it froze up. But we're back. Let me do a sound check. So you want to know what that song was? Yeah, that is. These were all songs from basically from the. There were three main fighting groups in leading up to and into the 1948 war. That was the Haganah, the Irgun, also called the Etzel, Irgun Tzava Israel, and the Lechi, Lachmei Cherut Israel. The Haganah was the most, I guess you could say, globalist or Western aligned. The Irgun or the Etzel, they were pretty right wing, and then the Lechi, also known as the Stern Gang, they were my type of people. they were Jewish terrorists, is what they were. I love those guys, and man, so the Etzel or the Irgun maybe was responsible for one of the most famous actions leading up to the war or the Declaration of Independence. Basically, the Etzel and the Lechi wanted to force the Brits out of the land of Israel. The Brits had taken over administration of the land of Israel after World War I in 1917, and the Brits stayed in control of Israel from 1917 until May 14th, 1948, when Israel declared independence, when Ben Gurion declared independence. And so those were the three main fighting groups. In the end, it was the Haganah, the most mild of them, that ended up taking charge, and in some pretty nasty ways. It was something called the Altalena. You could look it up. And that grew into the IDF. So the IDF, from its very beginnings, it has always basically been kind of, shall we say, globalist, Western aligned, Western worshipping. And the Irgun and the Lechi were much more, I don't know, they kind of fought wars more biblically, let's put it that way. The Irgun was famous for blowing up the King David Hotel. and that was maybe their most famous action. And yeah, they did a bunch of other things as well. But that song that we heard was, I think it's the one you're referring to as Sena. Let me just look at my history for a second here. One sec, and I'll post a link. No, YouTube is acting up. Anyway, you can look it up. It's called Sena, and it was a fighting song of, I believe, the Irgun. Okay. Alrighty, let me share the screen. Window, boom, I can close this. No, I'll leave that open. Streamyard, share. And there we go. Just 1 second. Just very quickly. Okay. All right, then. So we are now moving on to Genesis chapter 43. We'll go for about another hour or so. I know, famous last words, but that's the plan. Because I do have to make some dinner. Recommend a good Israel history book. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I can recommend. Now I have to think of the name of it. Jeez, what is it called? I'll have to. Oh boy, what's the name of it? Books about Israel. It might even come up first. No, 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 no. No, 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 no. Case for Israel. No, no, not Dershowitz. I wish the Dershowitz guy would shut up already. Let's see. No, 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 no. No, no, no. Oh, I'm even looking on the wrong. Hold on a second. 1 second here. What did I do? Oh, okay. I really hate technology sometimes. Okay. Let's see. Oh, this. Don't read this one. This guy's an idiot. I can't stand this guy. See, this is exactly. All right. Let me tell you about this book here. Okay. This Michael B. Oren. I actually, sadly, know him personally. Oh, you don't even see the screen, do you? Oh, you do. Yeah, I worked with him before he became an Israeli ambassador to the United States. We worked at the same company, and I thought he was a jerk from day one. And this is exactly what's wrong. This is everything that's wrong with these Netanyahu types. He's a Netanyahu, basically. No, actually, he's maybe more left wing than Netanyahu. But he wrote this book called Ally. What does it mean, ally? He's basically trying to show in this book what great allies the United States and Israel are. And this scumbag basically goes through an entire book trying to show how close Israel is to the United States and the United States is to Israel. Is basically promoting the same idea that Netanyahu has been promoting for the past decades, which led ultimately to October 7th. So I cannot tell you how much disdain I have for this arrogant scumbag. And I'm happy to say I did read the book just because I wanted to see what he had to say. And I vomited basically throughout reading the entire thing, but I did not pay for it. I ripped it off from a Barnes & Noble. Yes, send me to jail, prosecute me. I ripped it off from a Barnes & Noble back in the United States because I absolutely refused to pay for it. And then when I was done with it, I threw it in the garbage. So there you go. Anywho, that's not the book I was thinking of. There's one book that I read, and I can't see it here. I'm trying to look at it from the cover. I don't know. I can't see it here. I saw Ramallah. No, I didn't see Ramallah. Okay. Any rate, I don't know. Phil, I'll try to. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not supposed to. Whitey Boy. Yeah, I'll try to look it up and get you the name of the book. If not, I mean, there are plenty of books out there, right? But there was one that I was reading which I thought was very good. It was just like a good, solid history of the state of Israel. Okay. Yeah. All right. So Genesis 43. So Jacob is refusing to send Benjamin back down with the brothers. Reuven has sworn on the lives of his two sons that he'll bring Benjamin back, but Jacob is having nothing to do with it. He doesn't want to lose his only other son of Rachel. Verse 1, chapter 43, verse 1. So the famine was very heavy in the land, meaning in the land of Canaan, where Jacob was. Wahi, or maybe just in the whole general area. Wahi kasher ilu lechol et shever, asher eviu mimitzrayim. Wa yomer elehem avihem shuvu shivru lanu mi'at ochel. So when they'd finished, again, I'm going to paraphrase here, when they'd finished eating all the food which they'd brought back from Egypt, their father said to them, go back and buy us a little bit more food. So Jacob is living in denial. Denial ain't just a river in Egypt. Okay, Jacob he's trying to resolve a lot of pieces of his life at this point, and so he's not thinking straight, right? Verse 3, Wayomer, and he's also kind of an old man at this point. Wayomer Elau, in fact, he's going to die after he goes down to Egypt, which is going to be very soon. He's only going to live for another 17 years. Wayomer, which means that Jacob was with Joseph for the first 17 years of Jacob's life, and Joseph was with Jacob for the last 17 years of Jacob's life. It's kind of an interesting symmetry. Wayomer Elau Yehuda, lemor ha'ed ha'id banu ha'ish lemor lo tir'u panai bilti achichem itchem. And Judah said to his father, this man made us, he basically, it's not taking oath exactly, ha'ed ha'id, he made us bear witness, or he swore to us basically. He told us in no uncertain terms that you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. Again, paraphrasing. Verse 4, Im yeshcha mishalech et achinu itanu nirda wa nishbara lecha ochel. If you have an intention of if you would think about sending our brother, meaning Benjamin, with us, then we'll go down and we'll buy more food for you. So Judah is just laying it. He's telling Jacob the way it is. Verse 5. Im incha mishalech lo nered ka'ish amar elenu lo tir'u kanai birti achichem itchem. And if you do not send, in other words, you do not send our little brother, we will not go down to Egypt, because the man said to us, you will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. Verse 6. Remember, Shimon's in jail this whole time, and we don't know how long he's in jail. Joseph is holding Shimon in jail as basically a pledge, as a collateral. Verse 6. Wayomer Yisrael lama hare otem li lahagi laish haod lachem ach. And Israel says, why have you done this horrible thing to me? Why have you done this evil thing to me by telling this man that you have another brother? So Jacob is blaming the brothers for their stupidity. Okay? So what's Jacob's state? He's kind of living in denial, because we see, again, I'm not a psychologist or anything. I am the son of a psychologist, however, to kind of quote Amos. My mother is actually a psychologist, so I'm not a psychologist, but I am the son of a psychologist. However, what I see here is Jacob living in a kind of denial, right? They're running out of food, so Jacob says, "Hey, go get us some food," right? It's almost like he doesn't want to hear what the guy said, and then the 10 remaining brothers have to, put him back into reality. The man said, he's not going to see us, or we're not going to see him unless our little brother comes along. And then Jacob starts playing the blame game. Why did you do this? Why'd you tell him? What does it matter now, right? To quote Hillary Clinton, what difference does it make now, right? That really is the answer, okay? What point is it at this point for Jacob to start blaming his sons for telling the man that they have another brother? What's done is done, right? What difference does it make now? But Jacob is blaming him, and that's another sign of kind of, he's in an impasse. He doesn't know what to do. He's torn. Okay, verse 7. Vayomru Shaol sha'al ha'ish lanu hu lemolladtenu lemor ha'od avichem hai ha'ish lachem ach ונגד לו על פי הדברים האלה הידוע נדע כי יאמר הורידו את אחיכם. And they explained to him, the man just decided to ask us, or the man was insistent in asking us about us and about our household, where we come from. And asking, saying, is your father still alive? Do you have another brother, or do you have a brother? And we told him according to these words. How could we possibly know that he would tell us to bring down? That he would say, "Bring down your brother." Okay, so the brothers again they're just giving Yosef the facts. They're giving Jacob the facts. Verse 8: "Vayomer Yehuda el Yisrael aviu shilha hana'ar iti wa nakuma wa nelecha wa nihyeh velo namut gam anachnu gam ata gam tapenu." And Judah finally speaks up. Or I guess he was discussing it with Judah, right? Because Judah was the one who said it in the first place. So I guess it's a continuation of the conversation with Judah. Judah says to Israel, to his father, send the young man, meaning Benjamin, with me, and let us get up and go, so we can die and so we can live and not die. Us and you and our babies, our little ones. Verse 9. Anochi ervenu mi yadi tivakshenu im lo habiotiu elecha wa hatzi wa hi sagtiu lifanecha wa hatati lecha kol hayamim. So now remember, Reuven has already sworn earlier to his father that if he doesn't bring Benjamin back safely, then you can kill his two sons. Okay. Now Judah says, "Anochi erbenu miadi." I will be a guarantor for him from my hands. Okay, I'm sorry. Anochi erbenu. I will be a guarantor for him. Okay, miadi tivakshenu. You can. It's very hard to translate into the English, but basically the idea is expressed here is miadi tivaksheni. You can require him of my hand, but that doesn't make sense in English. It means you can miadi tivakshenu. Okay, you can take it out of my hide, or I don't know. I wouldn't even know exactly how to translate this well into English. I'd have to think about it. But literally, it says miadi tivakshenu. You can require him of my hand. Im lo haviotiv elecha. Back to you. In other words, I will be to blame. Okay, you can blame me. Okay, the blame is on me. The responsibility is on me if I don't bring him back to you. And I don't put him down, place him down before you. I will have sinned against you for eternity. Okay, so again, Yehuda here is making these, like Reuven is making these very, very grandiose, not grandiose, that's the wrong word because that implies something negative. He's making these very, sweeping statements promising that he's going to bring Benjamin back. Kilule hit mahnu Ki ata shavnu ze pa'amayim. And if we hadn't wasted all this time, if we hadn't delayed all this time, we could have already gone back and forth 2 times. We could already come back 2 times, twice. Verse 11. Vayomer elehem Yisrael avihem. And Israel, their father, said to them, Imken efo zot asukhu. If this is the way it's going to be, asukhu mizimrat aretz Michlechem Horiru Ish Minha Imeat Sari Umaat Dvash Nichot Wilot Botnim Ushkaidim. So I'm sorry, so let me retranslate this. So Israel, their father, said to them, or said, Imken efozot. Okay, if that's the way it has to be, then do this. Take from Zimrat, literally means like the pickings or the gleanings. Here they translate the best fruits. Take from the okay, we'll go with the best fruits, but not really. The pickings of the land in your vessels, in your bags, and take them down, and take it down to this man, and take down to this man a gift. Me'at, and then we have different substances mentioned. And there's always, whenever you have plants or animals, it's often unclear what they represent, especially plants. Not all the time. But here, okay, so tsari, they translate as balm. Dvash is honey. Spices, lot, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds. That's the way they translate it here. Okay? So they're going to bring him a gift. So I guess they could have survived off of the pistachios and the almonds. I mean, I often do that because I kind of do a modified keto diet. So I often survive mostly off, I eat a lot of nuts during the day and very little grain. But maybe they didn't have a lot of this left either. So they're sending a gift. A gift is meant to cover over the eyes of Joseph and make him forget, basically, butter him up or, Okay, verse 12. וכסף משנה קחו בידיכם, ואת הכסף המושב בפי אמתחותיכם תשיבו בידכם אולי משגהו. So take double the money. In other words, you're going to pay him double the price, and also you're going to return the money that was placed in your bags, remember? Okay? Ulai mishkehu. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was done by mistake. Okay, so Jacob is really trying to butter this guy up. Wa'et achichem kahu or kahu wakumu shuvu el ha'ish. And take your brother and get up and return to this man. El Shaddai, notice he doesn't say Yahweh, he says El Shaddai. El Shaddai yiten lachem rachamim lifnei ha'ish, and may the mighty one, the mighty God, give you mercy before this man. Washilach etchem et achichem acher wa'et Binyamin, and he releases to you your other brother, meaning Shimon and Benjamin. Va'ani kasher shacholti shachalti. And if I am to be bereaved of my sons, so I'm to be bereaved of my sons. Or if I am to be bereaved, so I'll be bereaved. In other words, Jacob has realized at this point it's kind of checkmate. He has no choice, and this is, of course, all from the hand of God. God is leading this entire process, but now Benjamin is going to end up going down to Joseph, to Egypt, and we'll see how that plays out. Verse 15, Vayikhu anashim et minha azot u'mishne kesef lakhu biyadam va'et Binyamin v'yakumu v'yerdu Mitzrayim ya'amdu lifnei Yosef. Okay, so just one correction. So I think when it says take double the money, I think it means return the money, the original money that was left in your sacks, plus the money you're going to pay. Not to pay double this time, plus return the money. Okay. Verse 15. So the men, meaning the brothers, took this gift and double the money they took in their hands, and they took Benjamin, and they arose and went down to Egypt and presented themselves before Joseph. So now this is the first time Joseph is going to see his brother Benjamin from his mother, his mother's only other son, who she gave birth to at the time of her death. She died in childbirth. This is the first time he's seen him in over 20 years. Verse 16, V'yari Yosef itam et Binyamin vayomer la'asher al beito have et ha'anoshim habayta u'tevoach tevach wa'achen ki iti yochlu ha'anashim b'tzoharayim. So Joseph saw that Benjamin was with them, and he said to the person in charge of his household, bring these people into my house and slaughter animals. In other words, prepare meat, and prepare it, or slaughter animals and prepare it for a meal. Because these men are going to eat with me this afternoon. In other words, they're going to eat lunch with me. Verse 17. Uyas ha'ish kasher amar Yosef. Why yaveh ha'ish et ha'anashim beta Yosef. And so the man, Joseph's servant, did as Yosef said, and he brought the brothers, again paraphrasing, into Joseph's house. Verse 18. Wayir'u anashim ki huv'u bet Yosef v'yamru al dvar hakesef shav be'am tehotenu bat hila anachnu muva'im lehit golel alenu ulehit napel alenu ולקחת אותנו לעבדים ואת חמורנו. Okay, so then the brothers, literally the men, but the brothers feared, or they were afraid that they were being brought into Joseph's house, and they said, this is because of the money that was returned, or that was placed in our sacks, on our first journey down here, or in the beginning, or at this earlier time. Because of that, because of that, we're being brought here. We're being brought into Joseph's house. Litgolel. That's also a bit of a difficult one to translate, but I guess translate here is assault. Golel comes from the underlying root gal, which means a circle or a wave. So maybe to surround us, or to, I'll go with surround us. I wonder how Robert Alter translates that one. So that's 43:17. Let's see, Everett Fox and Robert Alter, 43:17. Roll upon us. Okay. I guess in modern days it would be, roll up on us or something like that. And Robert Alter translates as fall upon us. Okay. Yeah, maybe if we want to be modern, we consider roll up on us or something like that. Okay. Where were we? Right, to roll up on us. I would say to surround us, or to, fall upon us is probably the best. I'm sorry, no, fall upon us is the next one. Oops. To attack us. Okay, you get the idea. and to take us as slaves, to take us as slaves as well as our as our donkeys. So that's what the brothers are thinking. That's why they're being invited into Joseph's house. That's it. That's the end. Why? Yigshu el ha'ish asher al bet Yosef. Why dabru elau petach habayet. So they went up to the man that was in charge of Joseph's house, and they spoke to him at the entrance to the house. Verse 20. Vayomru bi Adoni Yarod Yaradnu Bathila Dishbar Ochel. And they said, please, master, please, my master, right? Speaking politely. The first time we came down here, or we came down at first to purchase food. Wayahi Kibanu El Hamalon Waniftaha et am Tahotenu Wahine Kesef Ish Befi am Tahto Kaspenu Bamishkalo Wan Shev Oto Biadenu. So basically, they're explaining to him what happened with the money. Okay, they're being honest. They're telling Joseph's head of house that the money was given to them before Joseph can accuse them. Right. So if Joseph now accuses them, they could say, "Listen, we're honest. We already told your assistant about the whole thing, and we brought back the money." Okay, but to translate here, that when we came to the caravanserai, to the desert inn, and we opened up our sacks, behold, kesef ish befi am tachto. We saw that we behold, each person's money was at the opening, or was lying on top when we opened the knapsack. Each it's very hard to translate into the English. Our money, according to its weight. In other words, the full weight of the money had been returned to us. And here we've brought it back in our hands. In other words, to make a long story short, they're telling the guy, "Listen, we're honest. We brought back this money." Okay, excuse me for 1 second. Okay, verse 22. וכסף אחר הורדנו בידינו לשבור אוכל, לא ידענו מי שם כספנו באמתחתנו. And we brought more money in our hands to purchase food, and we have no idea who placed our money in our knapsacks. By the way, a little bit of a lie here. I wouldn't say a lie exactly, but a inconsistency with the previous story, or what we saw earlier. It was one brother, we don't know who opened up his knapsack at the desert inn and saw the money was there, and then the rest, when they got back to Jacob, opened up their sacks and also saw the money. Here he skips that part of the story. That would be too complicated and unnecessary. So he just says, at the Malone, we opened up at the desert inn, we opened up our knapsacks and saw that the money was there. Okay, so this is again, now if you were a secular Torah scholar, you might claim, well, the Torah is inconsistent. One is written by one of the writers, documentary hypothesis, and the story above is written by one of the authors, one of the four authors, and this part is written by another four authors because they contradict. But no, it's not the case at all. Okay, the Torah will sometimes change stories when there's a reason to change it. There's no reason for the brothers to explain all the gory details. They don't need to say, well, one of our brothers opened up a sack at the desert inn, and so the money was there, and then when we got home, then the other brothers opened up their sacks, and so it's too complicated. It's unnecessary. So he just simplifies the story and says, when we opened up our sacks at the desert inn, then we saw the money was there. That's all that Yosef needs to know, right? It gets the general idea across. Okay, verse 22. Wachesef Oh, I just read this. Verse 23. Yomer shalom lachem. Al tira'u Elohechem wa Elohei avichem natan lachem matmon be'ama tehotechem kaspechem ba elai wa yotze alehem et Shimon. And he said to them, and he said, Shalom lachem, peace be upon you. P-B-U-H, P-B-U-Y, peace be upon you. You, plural. Peace be upon y'all, as my southern friends say. Al tira'u, do not fear, Elohechem ve'Elohei avichem, that your father and the God and the father of your God and the God of your fathers. Now, this is interesting, right? This is the first time Yosef is referencing your God and the God of your fathers, right? So Yosef is now maybe giving a little hint that he's, a Hebrew, right? That would be a weird thing to say. How would Joseph know that there's even such a concept for the sons of Jacob as your God and the God of your fathers, right? Maybe it's the God of your father or something like that, because he knows that their father is still alive, but your God and the God of your fathers, obviously, he wants to bless them in the name of El Shaddai, in the name of Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But maybe here he's also letting slip a little bit, if the brothers are paying attention, that he knows a little bit more than he's letting on. So Natan lechem matmon is giving you a buried treasure. In your knapsacks. Kaspechem ba elai yitze elehem et Shimon. Your money has come to me. I'm not sure exactly what this means in this context. Verse 23. Let's get a quick translation. It's 23. Your silver has come to me. I don't even know what it means in the English. We'll just move ahead because I want to move ahead a little bit here. Yosef, and he brought Shimon. I'm sorry, it's Shimon, and he brought Shimon out to them. Remember, Shimon was in jail. Verse 24. Why yaveh ha'ish et ha'anashim beita Yosef? One second here. So it's not Yosef speaking, it's Yosef's assistant. So why would he say your father's in the God? I don't know. Anyway, I want to move on. Ish et anashim beta Yosef, and he brought the brothers, the men, into Joseph's house. V'iten mayim v'yir hatzu rag elehem v'yiten mispo lehamorehem. And he brought them inside the house, and he gave water for them to wash their feet, and he gave feed to their donkeys. Verse 25. Wa yachinu et hamincha ad bo Yosef b'tzaharayim ki sham'u ki sham yochlu lehem. And they prepared the gift. Remember the tribute that they brought. Ad bo Yosef b'tzaharayim, until Yosef came at lunchtime. Ki sham'u ki sham yochlu lehem, because they had found out, or they had learned that they would sham yochlu lachem, that there they would be eating a meal. Okay, now Yosef makes his entrance. Verse 26. Wa yavo Yosef habayta, wa yaviu lo et hamincha asher biadam habayta, wa yishtachu lo arza. And Yosef came into the house, and they presented to him the gifts that were in their hands. Biadam habayta, or they brought it into the house. Yeah, they brought into the house the gifts that they had presented, that they had prepared for him. Yishtachu lo arza, and they prostrated themselves before him on the ground. So this is the second time that the brothers are bowing down to Joseph. again fulfilling that dream. וישאל להם לשלום, ויאמר השלום אביכם הזקן אשר אמרתם עודנו חי. And he asked them how they were doing. Literally, he asked them if they were at peace. ויאמר השלום אביכם, and he said, is your elderly father at peace, who you told me about at peace? Is he still alive? So Joseph obviously, besides he's now seeing his brother Benjamin, but he obviously is concerned about his father. Verse 28, ויאמרו שלום לעבדך לאבינו עודנו חי. And they said, your servants, our father is at peace, and he's still alive. Why? Iqdu, why ishtahu? And they bowed down and prostrated themselves. Verse 29. وَيْسَا إِنَاو وَيَار et Binyamin. And he lifted up his eyes and saw Benjamin. In other words, he noticed at that point Benjamin, Achiu, his brother, Ben Imo, the son of his mother. And again, that's pointing out very explicitly here who Benjamin is exactly to him, why Benjamin is so important to him. He saw his brother, the son of his mother, the only other son of his mother. وَيُمَر هَزَّ أَخِيكَ مَكَتَانِ أَشَرْ أَمَرْتَمْ إِلَيْ وَيُمَر إِلُهِيمْ يَحْنَخَا بِنِي. And he said, and Joseph said, is this your brother, your little brother, who you told me about? And then he said, Joseph said, Elohim yachnacha b'ni, may God be kind to you, my son. That's what Joseph said to his little brother. Wayimaher Yosef ki nichmaru rahamao el achiu wayivakesh livkot. So Yosef began hurrying up, I guess, to get to the meal, because his mercy towards his brother, meaning towards Benjamin, was becoming overwhelming. And he was about to cry. And he went into an inner room and he started crying Shama there. Verse 31. וירחץ פניו ויצא ויתאפק ויאמר שימו לכם. He washed his face, meaning he washed away the tears so no one could see that he was crying. And he came back out and he restrained himself, right, from crying. In other words, he held back from crying. ויאמר שימו לכם. And he said, place down the food. Place down bread, literally. וישימו לו לבדו ולהם לבדם. And they placed down food for him separately, or him alone, and for them alone. In other words, Joseph ate separately, even though they were all sitting at the same table, or at least in the same room. They ate separately. ולמצרים האוכלים איתו לבדם. And I'm sorry, המצרים האוכלים איתו לבדם. And also to the Egyptians that were eating with him, they also ate alone. So if I'm understanding correctly here, Joseph eats alone, and the Egyptians eat alone, and the brothers are eating alone. So this is already another hint that something's a little bit different about Joseph. Why are the Egyptians not eating together with Joseph? Because Joseph is not an Egyptian. Okay? Now, the Egyptians know that Joseph is not an Egyptian. Joseph knows that Joseph is not an Egyptian. But the other brothers do not know that Joseph is not an Egyptian. So there are all these little hints being dropped that something's a little bit different here about Joseph, right? So why isn't Joseph eating with the other Egyptians? The brothers, maybe they're starting to pick up that something's a little bit different with Joseph, okay? כי לא יוכלון המצרים לאכול את העברים להם כי תועבה היא למצרים. Because the Egyptians would not break bread with the Hebrews, because it was considered an abomination to the Egyptians. Okay. Why? There's some speculation again, because the Hebrews were mostly shepherds, and the sheep was one of the gods of Egypt, etc., etc. I don't know. We could talk about this. We'll have to speak to an Egyptologist to understand exactly why. But for whatever reason, it was the Egyptians ate separately from the Hebrews. So there were three groups there. The Egyptians were eating alone, Joseph was eating alone, and the brothers were eating alone. Verse 33. וישבו לפניו הבכור בבכורתו ושעיר כצעירתו ויתמהו האנשים איש אל רעהו. So to make a long story short, I'm going to paraphrase here. The brothers sat according to their ages, okay, from the firstborn all the way down to the youngest. Okay, so how many brothers do we have here? 11. Actually, this is now, okay, this is the first time that all 12 brothers are reunited. All 12 brothers are in this room. The first time all 12 brothers have been together since Joseph was sold to Egypt, right? And the brothers looked at each other amazedly. They have no idea what the heck is going on, okay? Why are we eating a meal with this Egyptian guy who is sitting separately from the rest of the Egyptians and sitting separately from us, and he accused us of being spies. He returned our money was mysteriously returned to him or to us. He took our brother Shimon captive. He wanted us to bring our little brother to prove, and now he's asking about our father. He's asking about how our father's doing. Something is really weird is going on here, right? And that's why the brothers look at each other amazedly. وَيْسَا مَسْأُتْ مِئِتْ پَنَاو عَلَيْهِمْ وَتَرَيْv مَسْأَتْ بِنْيَمِين مِي مَسْأُتْ كُلَام حَمِش يَدot وَيِشْتُو وَيِشْكِرُوا عِمُو. Okay, so they brought out, so their portions were each brought out to the brothers. I'm again paraphrasing. Let's get a translation here. 34. It's also a little bit of an awkward sentence to translate. So let's see how Robert Alter deals with that. And he had portions passed to them from before him. Okay. And Benjamin's portion was 5 times more than the portion of all the rest. Can you imagine how much food was being placed on Benjamin's plate? It's like the difference between, European portions and American portions. It still amazes me just how much Americans eat. It's now that I've been out of America for a while, and I'm in a country where the portions are basically normal, and I'll watch like videos of, let's say, American cooking shows, because I'm very into cooking. It's one of my main hobbies, and a bunch of hobbies, but that's one of them. And or people visiting, eating food at various restaurants to show like what the food is like there. And I just cannot believe the size of these portions. I mean, Americans, I'm sorry to say it, they are a bunch of fat pigs. I've never, ever in my entire life seen such portions. I mean, it's almost like, they've become so materialistic. They have no portion control. They have no impulse control. They just can't control themselves. And that's why the whole country is so freaking fat. I've never seen anything like it. Every time I go back to the United States of America, even to visit, the first thing I always notice when I land in the airport is how fat everyone is. It's unbelievable. Try it yourself. Go to another country, stay there for a while, come back to America, land in an airport, and you think you landed in a fat farm. And I'm sorry to any Americans out there who, but better hear the hard truth. It just amazes me. But at any rate, how did I get onto that? Yes, because Benjamin is being served American-sized portions here. But of course, again, this is just another weird thing that's happening. The brothers have no idea what's going on. Why is Benjamin being given 5 portions? Right? Okay. We're going to go for a little while longer, and then I'm going to have to stop because it is getting a little bit late. We've been going at it for how long? For about 3 hours now? Yeah, just about 3 hours. So, all right, I'll try to get through this chapter. Or maybe not. Maybe we'll pick it up here next week. ויצאו את אשר על ביתו לאמור מלא את המתחות האנשים אוכל כאשר יאכלון שאת, ושים כסף איש בפי אמתחתו. So Yosef commands the head of his household, saying, fill their knapsacks, the knapsacks of these men, with as much as they can carry back, as much as they can carry, and place their money once again at the top of their knapsacks. So here we go again. ואת גביע הכסף תשים בפי אמתחת הקטון, ואת כסף שברו ויעש כדבר יוסף אשר דיבר. Okay, so all the money is going to be returned again at the tops of their knapsacks. And now Joseph's special silver goblet is going to be placed in Benjamin's knapsack. And also, of course, the money that he had brought. Okay. And so he did, Joseph's head of house, did as Joseph commanded, or as Joseph spoke. Verse 3. Haboker or ha-anoshim shulhu hema wa-hamorehem. Okay, and at the light of the morning, when the morning came, meaning when the sun rose, the men were sent away, the brothers were sent away, they and their donkeys. I have no idea why I came to mentioning the donkeys, but the donkeys are mentioned a lot. I mean, would you think they were sent away without the donkeys? I don't know. Verse 4, Hem yatsu et ha'ir lo hirchiku wa Yosef amar la'asher al bito kum redof acharei ha'anoshim wa hisartam wa amarta alehem lama shilamtem ra'a tahat tova. So they had gotten out of the city, or they had gotten not far out of the city, and Joseph said to the head of his household, the same guy. So this guy also knows what the score is, right? Because this guy was told to place the money back. This is the same guy who was told to place the money back into the knapsacks and to place Joseph's silver goblet in Benjamin's knapsack. Okay, so again we have that dramatic irony of this guy knows what the score is. Okay, but the brothers have no idea. This is, for the brothers, the story is getting, it's like, Kafka-esque, as they like to say. The story is getting weirder and weirder by the minute. The brothers have no idea what the heck is going on. So many weird things have happened so far that, they're just left staring at each other and scratching their heads. Okay, so he tells the head of his household to chase after them, to run after them. And when you catch up to them, say to them, Lama shilamtem ra'a tahat tova. Why did you pay back my goodness with evil? Okay, why did you return bad upon good? Okay, I did good to you, and now you're doing something bad to me. Hello, ze asher yishteh adoni bo, wahu nahish bo. Hare otem asher asitem. I'm sorry, it's not a question. Hare otem asher asitem. Hello, ze asher yishteh adoni bo. Is this not what my master drinks out of? This is again what the guy is told to say. Okay. Speaking, of course, about the silver goblet that was placed in Benjamin's knapsack. And he uses it for divination. So some people will say that lin nachesh means to look at liquids inside a cup. And that this part of the story would certainly support that idea, but I'm not so sure that that's necessarily the case. What you've done is wrong. Okay, literally what you've done is evil. So that's it. So now Joseph is setting him up. ויסירם וידבר עליהם את הדברים האלה, and he caught up to them, meaning the head of Joseph's household caught up to the brothers, and he spoke those words to them. ויאמרו אליו, למה ידבר אדוני כדברים האלה? חלילה לעבדיך מעשות כדבר הזה. And they said to him, למה ידבר אדוני כדברים האלה? Why are you telling us these things? Why are you saying these? Why is my master saying these words to us? Saying these words. חלילה לעבדיך, God forbid. Far from us, far from your servants may asot k'davar hazeh, from far from your servants to do such a thing. Verse 8. Hen kesef asher matzanu b'fi amtachotenu hashivonu elecha me'eretz Kina'an wa'ech nighnov mibet adonecha kesef or zahav. Was it not the money, or was it not the fact that the money we found at the tops of our knapsacks we brought back to you all the way from the land of Canaan? So how could we possibly even think to steal silver or gold from our master's house, from Joseph's house, right? It doesn't make sense. If we were going to steal, we wouldn't have brought the money back. Asher yimase ito me'avadecha wamet v'gam anachnu ni'eh la'adoni la'avadim. And they're so sure of themselves that they say anyone asher yimase ito me'avadecha wamet. Okay, among your servants. I'm going to have to paraphrase here. Okay, if this money is found, if this silver is found in any of our knapsacks, then let that person die. And the rest of us will be servants, will be Joseph's servants, be servants to our master. Verse 10. ויאמר גם אתה כי דבריכם כן הוא אשר ימצא איתו יהיה לי עבד ואתם תהיו נקיים. And he said, let it be according to your words, but then it's not according to your words, so I can't translate it that way. Says maybe something like, okay, let it be according to your words, but slight modification. Okay, with whomsoever the money is found, silver is found, he will be my servant, he will be my slave. Attempt you, Nikim, and you can go back, you're free, and the rest will be left free. So, why is this even a worse punishment? I think we've spoken about this in previous years. Okay, this is actually a worse punishment. Okay, the brothers say, with whomsoever the money is found, the silver is found, let him be put to death, and the rest of us will be your slaves. Okay, and the guy says, no. With whomsoever the money is found, he will be my slave, and the rest of you are free. Okay, it seems like a lighter punishment, but this guy who knows the score, the head of Joseph's household, he's playing with them. He knows exactly what's going on. He knows the story, not as much as Joseph does, but he has more knowledge about the big picture, certainly than the brothers do. And he knows that this is actually worse punishment. Why is it worse punishment? Because Benjamin, he knows that that the silver goblet is going to be found in Benjamin's knapsack, and that means Benjamin is going to be held, and the rest of the brothers are going to have to go back and face their father and say that Benjamin is not with them. That's a worse punishment. It is better that they be held in Egypt as slaves for the rest of their lives than that they have to go back and face their father and say that Benjamin is not with them, where two of them, Reuven and Yehuda, basically swore on their lives that they were going to bring back Benjamin with them. Okay, so this is actually the worst punishment. And this head of Joseph's household is deliberately playing with their minds. Okay, basically, he's trying to take revenge, extract all the punishment, and bring them to the point, as I said earlier, where they have such regret that they essentially repent, if you want to call it that, and then only then can Yosef forgive them. So there has to be a certain amount of punishment, a certain amount of suffering before the story can be resolved. And that's why Yosef is doing all this stuff. Not that he knows how it's all going to be resolved. He just knows that he's got to punish them and test them in a certain sense to see if they are really sorry about what they did to him. Verse 11, وَيِمَحَرُوا وَيَرِيرُوا إِشْ إِتْ أَمْ تَحْتَوْ أَرْتَ وَيِفْتَحُوا إِشْ أَمْ تَحْتَوْ. And they hurriedly took down their knapsacks, meaning off their donkeys, put them on the ground, onto the ground, وَيِفْتَحُوا إِشْ أَتْ أَمْ تَحْتَوْ. And each brother opened up his knapsack. ويحبس بגדול, חל ובקטון, הילה, וימצא הגביע באמתחת בנימין. So they did a search from the oldest to the youngest. Again, we see this. We saw that that's the way the brothers were seated as they ate with Yosef. We know in general that things are arranged from the oldest to the youngest. We see this many, many times throughout the Tanakh. Okay, so they began with the oldest and ended with the youngest, and of course Benjamin is the youngest. And the goblet, the silver goblet, was found in Benjamin's knapsack. And boy, oh boy, that broke them basically. وَيِقْرَأُوا سِمْرُوتَمْ وَيَعْمُسْ إِشْ الْحَمَرَوْ وَيَشُوبُ هَائِرًا. They ripped their clothing. Was an ancient sign of mourning, because basically they knew at this point that, that was the end. That was the end for their father. I would imagine they're just ripping their clothing out of, the severity of the situation, but maybe also they knew that basically this would kill their father. And maybe the implication here is they're ripping their clothing in mourning, in anticipated mourning of their father, because when he finds out that Benjamin is not coming back, that's going to be the end of Jacob. And each man loaded up his donkey and returned to the city. So that's it. Now they're all going back and dejected, afraid, and back into the city to face Joseph. ויבוא יהודה ואחד ואחיו בית יוסף והוא עדינו שם ויפלו לפניו ארצה. So Judah and his brothers came into the house of Joseph. He was still there, right? They'd just eaten lunch with him. ויפלו לפניו ארצה, and they fell before him to the ground. They prostrated before him, fell to the ground before him. Okay, so why does it mention Judah separately? Again, this is how biblical Hebrew works. We don't know this at this verse yet, but Judah is now going to be the protagonist, right? Judah is going to issue a desperate or an extremely heartfelt from the heart plea for his brother Benjamin. Okay, so this is just indicates just how biblical Hebrew works. Okay, where Judah is being singled out because he's now in the following part of the story, he is going to become the protagonist, and this is going to lead to. One second, please. This is going to lead to that climax of the entire book of Genesis, and I think that's where we'll stop. Okay. Verse 15. ויאמר להם יוסף מה המעשה הזה אשר עשיתם הלא ידעתם כי ינחש איש אשר כמוני. And Joseph said to them, Joseph's still playing with them, right? He's really, he's really letting them have it. He really wants to punish them, take revenge. I guess really to test them and also to extract this pain and suffering from them, because Through pain and suffering is the only way we can ultimately achieve regret and atonement. That's why on Yom Kippurim we fast. We do a symbolic pain and suffering to show our regret for all of our actions. Yosef, so Joseph says to him, what is this thing that you've done? Would you not have known that a man like me certainly knows how to use divination? In other words, I could figure this out, that this is what happened to my cup using divination. Verse 16, Wayomer Yehuda. So now Yehuda takes the reins. Okay, remember Yehuda is the third born. Wayomer Yehuda, ma nomar l'Adoni, ma nidaber u'ma nitztadak. And Yehuda says, what can we say to our master? What words can we possibly say, and how can we possibly justify ourselves? That's it. It's like checkmate here. God has found out, or has recompensed maybe, the sin of your servants. What sin? Yehuda is referring to what he did to his brother Joseph, that he's now speaking to. Hinenu avadim la'adoni, gam anachnu, gam asher nimsa hagavia biyado. Behold, and now we will be slaves to my master, us, and also the one with whom the chalice was found in his hand. Okay, so Yehuda is actually trying to, and I've mentioned this in past years, Yehuda, by suggesting this, or by trying to implant into Joseph's mind what should happen to the brothers, is actually trying to abrogate his worst fear, or trying to avoid his worst nightmare, which is having to go back and face his father and say that Benjamin is not with them. And Joseph knows exactly what the score is, and he says, just like above, Joseph actually, it's so clever. I mean, it's just so brilliant. Joseph actually, it seems like he's being a nice guy and giving a lighter punishment, right? But really, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's actually giving a worse punishment in verse 17. V'yomer halil ali me'asot zot. Said, far from me to do such a thing, to do this. Ha'isha asher nimsa gavia biyado hu ye'eli aved. So the person in whose hand the chalice was found, he will be my slave. Atem alu l'shalom el avichem, and you can go back to your father in peace. That is a worse punishment. Okay, Joseph is playing them like a fiddle. Okay, because he knows that the worst thing that could possibly happen to them, they would literally rather die, rather be prisoners, rather be slaves for life. That would be an easier punishment for them than to have to go back to Jacob and say, Benjamin is not with us, because that would kill their father, and they know it. Shabbat shalom, teshukah, emek, hadani. I am late. Was taking a Shabbat nap. Okay, we will forgive you for taking your Shabbat nap. It's your right on Shabbat. So this is Yosef really, again, we spoke about dramatic irony. Yosef knows exactly what's going on here. We as the audience know exactly what's going on here, and the brothers have no idea what's going on here. So we see exactly the plays that Yosef is making. Yosef maybe even himself doesn't realize where it's all heading and what he's doing, but he's going maybe by his instinct, but the brothers have no idea what's going on. But Yosef is really, he's extracting revenge from them, as I mentioned, but it's revenge with the hope of testing them, with the hope of squeezing out that last bit of, sin and responsibility that they may have, with the goal of achieving a resolution, which will come very soon. So let's read through this. We'll get to the resolution, and then we're going to stop. Okay? Which is in the next chapter. Vayigash elau Yehuda wayomer. So this is one of the most beautiful speeches in all the entire Tanakh. Vayigash elau Yehuda wayomer bi Adoni. So Yehuda approached him, Wayomer bi Adoni, and said, please, my master, Yidaber na avdecha davar be'azne Adoni. May your slave speak, may your servant speak in the ears of his master, of my master. Right? So Judah is being super, submissive, super formal and polite to Joseph. And let not you become inflamed at your slave, at your servant. Because as you are, so is Pharaoh. Or as Pharaoh is, so are you. You're like Pharaoh. Okay. In other words, really not buttering him up, but submitting himself to Joseph's status in Egypt, to Joseph's power. Verse 19. Adoni sha'al et avadao lemor hayish lachem av or ach. My master, and whenever it says my master, speaking about Joseph. So Joseph asked his servants. My master asked his servants, meaning Joseph asked the brothers, hayish lachem av or ach. Do you have a father or a brother? Speaking about Benjamin. Wanomer al Adoni, Ishlanu av zaken. And we said to my master, Ishlanu av zaken, we have an elderly father, Yeled zikunim qatan. And he has and there's a little one who is the son of he gave birth to it in old age, son of his old age. Wa achiu mate, and his brother is dead. Water hu livado le'imo, and he's the only one left of his mother. He's the only son left of his mother. Wa'aviv ahivo, and his father loves him. Verse 21. Watomer el avadecha horiduhu elai wasima einai alau. And you said to your servants, bring him down to me, that I may place my eyes upon him, that I may cast my eyes upon him. Verse 22. One omer el Adoni lo yuchal hana'ar la'azov et aviu wa'azav et aviu wamet. And we explained to my master that we cannot allow the little one, our youngest brother, literally the youth, to leave his father, because if he leaves his father, he'll die, meaning his father will die. Jacob will die. Verse 23. Watomer el avadecha im lo yered achichem hakaton itchem lo tosifun lirot panai. And you said to your servants, if your little brother does not come down with you, does not come with you down to Egypt, lo tosifun lirot panai. You will not be able to see my face again. You will not ever see my face again. Verse 24, why he ki alinu el avdecha avi. And so it was when we went back to your servant, my father, when agelo et divrei Adoni, and we told him the words of my master. Again, this is very formal speech. You can even see this in today, okay, where this kind of language would be used, like speaking in the third person is a very formal way of speaking. For instance, in Portuguese, if you go to a restaurant, the waiter may say to you, "Senor quer pedir?" Does senor want to order? Right. This is still used even in modern times. It's kind of very formal talk where senor basically means master, right? And so Mr. Master, same thing, right? So this formal kind of language we see all the way back in Biblical Hebrew, so more back in Biblical Hebrew than we do today. Okay, but that's whenever it says my master and my servant, it's the brothers speaking in this formal, in this very respectful third person form to Joseph. Okay, verse 25. When Yomer Avinu Shuvu Shivru lanu ma'at ochel. And our father said, return and buy us a little bit of a bit of food. Verse 26. One omer lo nuchal laredet im yesh achinu katon itanu. And we said we cannot go back down unless our little brother is with us. Yaradnu ki. I'm sorry. לא נוכל לרדת, we cannot go back down. אם יש אחינו הקטון איתנו, ירדנו, כי לא נוכל לראות פני האיש, ואחינו הקטון איננו איתנו. Okay. And he said, we cannot go back down. אם יש אחינו הקטון איתנו, if our little brother were were to come with us, were to be with us, then we can go down. Because we are not allowed to see the face. We're not allowed to be presented before this man if our little brother is not with us. Verse 27, Why yomer avdecha avi elenu, and your servant, my father, said to us, Atem yadatem ki shnayim yalda li ishti. So your servant, my father, said to us, you know that only that two sons, or literally that two were born, that my wife gave birth to two. Okay, his wife Ishti, his real wife Ishti. He's talking about Rachel, of course, right? And that's who he calls Ishti. That was his real wife. That was the only wife he ever wanted. The rest were forced upon him. Verse 28. Vayitzeh hachad me'iti wa'amar ach tarof toraf v'lo ra'itiu ad hena. And one has gone away from me, gone away from before me, and I said, Tarof Torah, he has certainly been ripped to pieces by a wild animal, because that's what the brothers told Jacob. And I've never seen him again until now. Oops. Verse 29. ולקחתם גם את זה מעם פניי וקראו אסון והורדתם את שיבתי ברעש עולה. And if you take this one also from away from me, literally ma'im panai, from before my face, and any tragedy should happen to him, you will have brought my white head, my hoary head, they usually translate that, as I said earlier, down to the grave in evil. Okay, before it said biagon, here it says bera'ah. Similar ideas. Verse 30, and now, if I should come to your servant, my father, and the little one is not with us, his being, his essence is connected to his essence, meaning Jacob and Benjamin are deeply connected to each other, because again, it's Jacob's only son left from his beloved wife Rachel. And so it will be if he sees that the little one is not with us, is not there, he will die. And your servants will have brought down your servant, our father's hoary head in agony to the grave. Verse 32. Ki abdecha arav et hana'ar me'im avi lemor, because your servant stood as collateral, stood as guarantor for the little one before my father, saying, and this is Yehuda speaking. Remember, there were two times Reuben said, if I don't bring back the little one, then you can kill my two sons. And Judah said, if I don't bring back Benjamin, then I will have sinned to you for all time. Okay? Imlo avienu elecha v'chatati la'avi kol yamim. So this is what I swore to my father. If I do not bring him back to you, I will have sinned to my father for all eternity, literally for all days, for all the days. Verse 33. Wa'ata yishevna avdecha tachat hana'ar eved la'aduni wa'na'ar ya'al im echau. And now Judah makes an incredible sacrifice. I'm telling you, this almost brings me to tears every time I read this. Okay? Now, let your servant, this is Judah speaking, let your servant sit or stay as a slave in place of the little one, as a slave to my master in place of the little one, and let the little one go back up with his brothers. So Judah is saying he is now making a huge sacrifice. He is ready to be a slave to Joseph, to the second in command of Egypt for the rest of his life, rather than hurt his father by not allowing Benjamin to return. Because how could I go back up to my father and when the little one is not with me? Lest I see the horrible thing, the evil that finds my father. In other words, unless I see the horrible things that this causes my father. Okay, so this is really one of the most beautiful speeches from here down to here. And by the way, this is where our parsha starts. Is that right? Vayigash. Yes, that's exactly where our parsha starts. Okay, and that's the name of the parsha, Vayigash, which means approached. So this is one of the most beautiful, most heartfelt speeches in the entire Tanakh. Okay, Judah basically pouring out his heart and ready to do anything, to even sacrifice his own life, basically, his own freedom for the rest of his life, not to hurt his father, and to make sure that Benjamin returns to Jacob. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Antoinette. And then we're coming to, as I said, what it can be considered the single verse in all of Genesis that is the climax of the book of Genesis. One could say that all of the book of Genesis, or at least beginning with the stories with Abraham, where we're introduced to Abraham, culminates in this verse. Okay? And then it's like all the tension that's been building up is released in this one verse. Here it is. ולא יכול יוסף להתאפק לכל הניצבים עליו ויקרא הוציאו כל איש מעלי ולא עמד איש איתו והתוודע יוסף אל אחיו. And Joseph could not hold back anymore. לכל הניצבים עליו, and to all of those who stood in service before him, ויקרא, he called out, הוציאו כל איש מעלי, get rid of every man from before me. In other words, take everyone out of here. And there was no man there when Joseph revealed himself to his brothers. ויתן את קולו בבכי וישמעו מצרים וישמעו בית פרעה. And he raised his voice, and Egypt heard, and the house of Pharaoh heard. It doesn't mean literally. It meant, I think it's trying to explain just like how intense the crying was, and that eventually Egypt and the house of Pharaoh found out. Okay, and this is it. Wayomer Yosef el achav, and Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. Could you imagine? What? I mean, there are no words, and we'll see that's exactly the case. Ani Yosef ha'od avi chai. I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? V'lo yachlu echav la'anot oto ki nivhalu mepanav. And his brothers could not answer him. They couldn't say a word back to him. Ki nivhalu mepanav, because they were astonished at his face, or from before him. They were so astonished they couldn't even answer. I don't even have to explain it, right? They had no words. But here it is. This is the verse, Genesis 45:3, that can be considered the climax of Genesis. This is where everything has been leading up to. And from here we have a downhill slide is the wrong word, but everything is rolls downhill from here to the end of Genesis, and that's how the book ends. Okay, so this moment is the release of all that tension, everything that's been building up from when we are first introduced to Abraham, and he's told to go to the land of Canaan, and then in Genesis 15, he's told that your descendants will be oppressed in a land that's not theirs for 400 years, and then eventually they will return to this land. That this first step in that process is now in place, right? This is where it all was leading to. This is how that is going to happen. We'll go on a little bit more. Vayomer Yosef el Achav, Gishuna elai, Vayigashu. And Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. And they came close to him. Vayomer ani Yosef achichem asher machartem oti Mitzrayma. And he said, I am Joseph, your brother, who you sold me to Egypt, to whom you sold to Egypt, or whom you sold to Egypt. And now don't be sad, and let it not be, or let there not be fury in your eyes. Okay? In other words, don't be sad and don't be upset. That you sold me. Hena, that you sold me here. Because in order to keep you alive, in order to keep us alive, God sent me before you. So Joseph sees the hand of God in all of this, right? All of the pain and suffering that he suffered over the past 25 or so years. Again, he was placed into jail when he was, I guess, a bit after 17. He was sold down to Egypt when he was 17. He got out of jail when he was 30. That's when he told Pharaoh about his dreams. There were 7 good years, so that makes him at least 37, probably a bit more. And then a couple of bad years when this whole thing happened. So he's around 40 years old at this point. And he left his brothers when he was 17. So 23 years or so, this whole ordeal for Yosef, which now culminates in his revealing himself to his brothers. Okay. He's a shnatayim. So we see exactly that this is 2 years into the 7-year famine. So that means 7 good years, 2 bad years. So that's 9 years. We don't know when the good years started after Joseph predicted them. We know Joseph got out of jail at 30. We know he's sold down to Egypt in 17. So again, he's around 40 years old now, more or less, give or take. Because it's already 2 years into the famine in the midst of the land. And there'll be another 5 years that there is no harish, there's no plowing, and there's no reaping. Verse 7. And it was God who sent me before you, to prepare for you a remnant on the earth, and to keep you alive, and literally for a great escape, to keep you alive and to allow you to escape the famine, right, or to allow you to escape death. And behold, or now, it is not you that sent me here, Elohim, but rather God. We are simenu la'av de Pharaoh, and he's placed me like a father over Pharaoh, uladon lechol beito, and master of all his household, moshel b'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and a ruler over all of Egypt. And we are going to end here because it's late and it's been a long study. Shabbat shalom, Shavua tov. And that is going to be the end of our study. But again, this is right here. This is the climax. This is the focal point of all of the book of Genesis. V'yomer Yosef el achiu el Echav, and Joseph said to his brothers, Ani Yosef, I am Joseph. That's it. Right here, if you want to water down Genesis to 2 words, it's these 2 words right here. Ani Yosef. I am Joseph. This is the climax. Everything leads up to this point. And from here, all of that tension is released. All of that, it's like you climb up to the top of a mountain, you reach the top, Ani Yosef, and then everything, you slide back down. Okay? Or you coast back down. Everything now until the end of Genesis is coasting back down to basically tie up the loose ends of the book of Genesis, which will be the death of all of that generation. And then we afterwards pick it up a couple of 100 years later with the book of Exodus. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. Any questions, any comments before we end? So just a couple of announcements. Again, I would really appreciate if everyone could let people know about this study. I would really like to make it grow. Okay, so tell your friends. Tell your enemies, tell your frenemies, tell your neighbors, tell people, random people on the street, and let's get the word out about this study. I think it's really the only one of its type where it's really, a regular Karaite Tanakh-based study without any Christian baloney, without any rabbinical baloney. And I think it's very important to get the word out about this study, because I truly believe that Karaism, Tanach-only, whatever you want to call it, is the only future. And it's becoming more and more critical as days go on with what's going on in Israel. Israel is in sakanat chaim, it's in mortal danger at this point. And I think it's extremely important that we get the word out about returning to the true Tanakh as best as we can understand it. I don't claim to know everything. I never have. I don't claim to have all the answers. But I claim to have the attitude and the direction that I know in my heart, and I know in the hearts of all of those who participate in the studies, that we want to recapture the true Tanakh. And that's really the only thing at the end of the day that can save Israel from its current situation, is returning to Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to returning to the Tanakh, casting off the rabbinical baloney, the nonsense of the Mishnah and the Talmud, and all the destruction they've brought upon our nation for the past 2,000 years, with their bizarre interpretations, with their distorted version of the Torah. Sorry, Antoinette, I know you're rabbinite now, but so we really need to get the word out now. We really do. I really think it's vitally important. And so please do. Okay, again, you can do shares, likes, whatever, all that, social media stuff, share, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And I'll point out again that these studies always remain online, both on Facebook and on YouTube. I don't erase them. So if anyone wants to, if you want to send the link to the study, if you look at the original post, you can see where all the links are: the Facebook link and the YouTube link. And yeah, we'll just pick it up again next week. We'll finish off the book of Genesis next week, and then that's it. We're already into the book of Exodus. Hard to believe. So I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom, a Shavua Tov. Let's all celebrate Christmas by going to Chinese restaurants. That's what Jews do on Christmas. That's at least New York Jews as we grew up. That was a tradition. We never went, but we actually, I don't know what we did on Christmas. Nothing. I think we just stayed at home because everything was closed. But yeah, go to a Chinese restaurant and celebrate the Christmas the Jewish way. And there's an old joke, which is, what's the proof that that Chinese society is older than Jewish society? And that's because Jews could not exist without Chinese restaurants. Any rate, whatever. I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. And as usual, we'll go out with some music, and hope to see you all again next week. Have a wonderful week, and we'll pick it up again next week with the end of Genesis.
בימים ערומים של פרעות והמים הלילות השמונים של יהוד. בערים בכפרים את דגלנו נרים ועלה הגנה וחירות. יעשו קשות כהמון עבדים ולשתות במחאה לדבר. ברצוננו להיות לעולם נכונים, חלומנו למות בארצנו. בימים אדומים של פרעות ודמים, בלילות השחורים של יהוד. בלחינו הכפרים את דגלנו נרים, ועלה הגנה וחירות. Amen.